you're creating, you're sculpting time that poem unfolds within. And that's a special privilege of the lyric poem in a way. So I like to say I'm a lyric poet, even though that includes many things. I do meditative stuff and all, but I'm not really a narrative poet. As a teacher, though, I've dealt with everything. I'm going to give you one phrase I've been teasing Frank with to show you my minimalist instinct. And it's a one phrase poem. It's only a sentence. If you count a phrase as a sentence, you know, they sometimes call that an absolute sentence. The moment, grappa, sadness, and the memory of rain. Grappa, sadness, and the memory of rain. And when I look at it, I don't do scansion with anybody, but I look at it, I see, if you know this stuff, there's a rhythm to it. It's a trochee, grappa, sadness, and then there's a quickening anapest and the memory, and then I am, of rain. I didn't compose it that way. I'm not a freak about that. It's a nice thing to learn when you're learning it, but I realize there's a reason why that phrase hangs together, and that matters to my work. Voice and music matter. Now I'm going to start with a poem, a very recent one. Some things I'm going to read you are a little bit on the slight side, although I've eliminated some of them, but I always hope they're doing something. And this one is our shared experience that probably all of us have had, getting that package from that company or that bag to your door, that company that's prospering on this. And I'm always grateful they can send me things. I don't want my books coming from them, though. We have Open Books here, which everybody can Google. It's one of the great poetry-only bookstores in America and has been for decades and decades. So this little poem I'm going to open with, because we share this, is called Gift Card. Gift Card from a friend or anonymous in this little cardboard cradle, artfully designed to attract the eye and the greed of a consumer who thinks he's getting something for free because someone else paid. Of course, there's a lesson, but you know, I want things and I want them to be free, especially if it's a token of someone's undeclared affection or, who knows, love. You'd think it would bother me not to know who sent it, but probably not an enemy, even in these strange times. And trying to guess helps me practice what it might be like to get everything. So there's a little twist. And I often, I came out here to the Northwest with what I think of as my East Coast sense of irony. And you do regularly run into people, God help them, who say what they mean and expect you to mean what you say. But some of us East Coasters share that little irony about a somewhat lack of irony among some people. So there was a little sting in the tail of that poem. I like shifting my tonal quality. So you see what the speaker is saying there. And trying to guess helps me practice what it might be like to get everything. So what we get plugged in with. I'm not going to explain the poems anymore. I believe in just presenting them, really. There's a little bit of detail you might need. This one takes us somewhere else, and you have to know that it's centered on the Bosphorus River. Somebody here knows Turkey well, maybe others. And it's a river that has the hydrogeological oddity, one of the rare ones, that it runs two ways at once. It's two rivers. There's a river on top, that's the lighter one, the freshwater originally one from the Black Sea, and the other one originally from the Mediterranean, but it's the Sea of Marmara, is salt, so it's heavier. So that kind of is the central metaphor of the poem. The heavier water runs deeply one way and the lighter comes on the surface. And that, you may know, separates Asia from Europe. It's one of the most central important rivers in the world through the center of, also separates Istanbul. And this poem is called Kahve, a fable. Kahve is Turkish for coffee. And you know Turkish coffee, if you've had it, or Yugoslavian, they make each thing individually in a small pot, classically. And it features a foam, a special foam that exceeds what your espresso foam might be, or latte foam. It's called K-Mach, and that's in the poem. But the poem isn't about how you do this. Those are just some references. The only poem that needs this much reference, I think. Cave, a fable. The lost, the wounded, and the exile gather in a small cafe on the Bosporus, sipping Turkish coffee, syrupy and bittersweet as life, when the kaymak is skimmed from the lately boiling copper pot. Each receives his portion. Silently, they watch the flowing river, aware of its invisible undercurrent, the long bridges that connect two continents, the way love tries to connect us, the way migrating fish connect two seas, finding their way through deep water that flows two ways at once. If they were boys, they could dive like the seabirds in autumn. If they were young men, they could try to swim the treacherous river, to make of their strong bodies a channel between shores. But their only destination is the past. The heart migrates like this. It must seek what it needs in layers, finding its way through the fresh surface, while the salt flow underneath pulls it to depths it doesn't understand. Each thinks of someone he loved and what came after. A newer poem. Someday you will think of today as happy. Maybe it's also a reference to our shared situation. Someday you will think of today as happy, despite the numbers you call that can't be reached, despite the news like a virus, despite the world slipping into its usual hell, despite your disappointment in yourself, despite your worry about money, family, and the dog, the penalties you're always paying when you're lucky enough to have love, if that's what it is, at least long enough to wonder if the consecrating moment of stillness in which you can think this is happy. So hard to recognize the meaning of anything while it's happening, isn't it? Especially something like happiness, sadness, joy, grief, the galloping emotions which pull you into the future like an inexperienced rider on a horse that doesn't know how to stay put. And yes, this is a terrible metaphor whose meaning, like all meanings, pretends to be obvious. The way I do it is to fold my family into a space as small as my breath and hold them inside my body, in the warm pouch of my belly, in the cold pockets of my lungs, as we leave together in the thinnest hour of the night when nobody's watching, or if they are, they can't see us, pass silently as shadows down the secret alleys where you can escape history by becoming invisible. Yet your loved ones remain intact, like jewels in an intricate setting. There's no need to worry so long as I keep running down the unlit alleys where there's nothing to stop me, except the rats and the bodies we leap over, as easily as the moonlight sweeping my hair, so it almost seems we're flying. Lesson 0. We're going back in time to see how everything started. The creation of the heart, not as metaphor. How it is the first organ to develop. How you can feel it beating weeks after the act of love or violence that set it going. How everybody has one, like a fist, but each grows at its own pace until it's large enough to suffer and keep going. How at birth, the mother's blood is replaced by what we all breathe, the mixed, unsteady air of being human. How capacious the heart must be to circulate what feeds and poisons us. There's a little poem called Regret that was also just accepted for publication. There's no reason for the regret I feel on a beautiful July morning, or if there is, I can't see it behind the sun on the leaves or the leaves themselves sprinkled with summer. If it's out there, I can't find it, lost like the squirrel that was here just a minute ago, dancing on the deck before disappearing into a shrub. If you want to take this further, and maybe I have to, you and I both know that regret comes with the world, comes with being in the world, comes with being yourself in a world you didn't make and must leave, whether you want to or not, the way light leaves the trees, when all I want to do is dance. I'll skip this one, but I have to say it's a movie poem, Frank. It's the rules of life, and it's called Read Before Playing, title poem of a manuscript I got, but I'm just gonna read the opening for of it. The rules include never having to say you're sorry. The rules include knowing you should be sorry. The rules include feeling sorry without knowing why. This is too bad. If you want simple rules, go somewhere that has simple rules, rules that are easier to understand. So that's the opening of that short poem. It goes to day for night shooting, Frank. I'm going to read this one, Terminal. Slightly longer, which for me is epic. It's more than a page, like a page and a quarter. And it's got, again, for Frank and anybody else who cares about Italian or classical things, it's got a line from Dante as its epigraph from the Inferno. Terminal, you're waiting at a gate for a plane you have to take. Waiting, it seems, forever. And if you don't make it now, you will lose something more valuable than money. And you're standing tired because all the plastic chairs are taken and the cushioned bench is filled with the mountain of someone's hooded body sprawled thoughtlessly across it. Sleep is a treasure on a day that started early in an aromatic city on a continent where no one saw you off and no one is expecting your arrival. So you're standing, hopeless as a ghost, not wanting to lodge an arrow of complaint that will land nowhere, not wanting to fall asleep standing up, which you ache to do for fear of losing the swordsman's grip of your fist on the handle of the crafty leather case with all the hidden compartments that hold your raison d'etre, your papers, your tablet, and your cell phone. Because if you collapse, you will wake on the dirty floor across the corridor from Cinnabon, not knowing where you belong, how to locate your border, the promised last connection lost. Maybe halfway through hell, Dante among the hypocrites felt like this, but this strange, languorous suffering has no name. The stalled finale, as common as it is, as usual, in our world of transit, robots, and replicas of light, the heart, the exiled heart, must stand alone, its flight delayed again. This is a little poem with a serious subject, and it's a few years old. Once I read this thing in a news report, I wrote about it. Reported missing at the corner of Cleveland and Linhart Streets. By the way, I think this took place in Cleveland. Reported missing at the corner of Cleveland and Linhart Streets. The infant was taken from its mother's arms. This is not the way to go out into the world. Hungry, alone but for the deceiver who has grabbed you, frightened by every sound and every color, the red of the van's interior, the green of the false nurse's dress, the blue sky racing past the windows. At the intersection of null and nowhere, I wait a long time for the van to return. I watch for its shadow to bend around a corner. I listen for the kiss of brakes to soften the force of turning and turning again, all colors whirling, for the shrill cry of the birds to become a human cry. Our Lord who art vanished, like the silence under numbers, or the glistening between dying stars, folding into themselves with immense fingers of energy which stretch across emptiness, across time, who has remembered our love of silence, who speaks to us through silence, who is acknowledged and begged for in silence. Do not forget the cradle that is empty. Do not forget the full breasts aching. Do not forget the red and white spinning toy. I have to catch up where I am now. I've got a little sequence of 3 poems, and the mood shifts a bit. And I've got to say, to explain, I don't practice Buddhism. I just was born with an innate understanding of negation and silence. And if I would cite my college encounter with French existentialism, but I read some Buddhist stuff, and this particular set of poems aren't Buddhist, but each of the 3 little poems contains a line from the writings known as the Zhuangzi, and that is really one of the 2 original Taoist sects, in a way preceding the Buddhism we know. And it is a very lighthearted, brilliant in its original, supposedly, and brilliant in translation, set of anecdotes and tales that do not negate life. They don't preach nothingness, they preach perspective, being. Anyway, they're wonderful, and they were named after a guy, Zhuang, who was exiled from a court and supposedly was the one who wrote these, but they think that maybe a number of like-minded followers produced these that came to us from the 4th century BC. And it's not about that, but I'm telling you why there's a line and a reference to Zhuangzi in each of these poems, and that's to create a perspective on what the poem's doing. The 3 poems are called Short Takes for the Wounded, 1, 2, and 3. Short Takes for the Wounded 1. Children in the dying hospital know they're dying, but look happy when the camera's on and they get to say what they were told to say to people who aren't there. They touch your heart, if you have one, for a moment, or fill the hole where the heart was. They play with stuffed toys in the jumbled room, blocks, balloons, or simply lie in bed, their heads propped at odd angles. Better not to move, but let things be, Zhuangzi says. Why am I compelled to watch this vignette of future grief again, when what it needs to satisfy can't be? Short Takes for the Wounded 2. The student, so desperate to read her poem, that she didn't wait for the guy at the mic to finish his interminable one, in which something that happened to him once is happening again forever and infects us like a rash or a disease with no known cure. It's easier to explain the way of a sage to someone who has the talent of a sage. As Zhuangzi tells us, the woman crookback said. They stand up in my mind suddenly, with no warning, the way she stood at the lonely mic and read, to no applause, but some astonishment, words she thought would set fire to the night. This one takes a reference to the 3rd of the set, goes somewhere else, and it has a reference, I only feel the need to explain, to Beethoven's misnamed symphonies. Because he gave, if you know Beethoven, he gave a famous concert, Christmas concert in 1808, where he played the piano and he premiered both his 5th and 6th symphonies, which he had worked on together. Unbelievable if you know those because of the different mood of them, the pastoral one and the 5th. And he allowed them to be misnumbered in the program for that concert. It was all Beethoven. It's a very famous concert. I'm not a musicologist, but I love music. Short takes for the wounded, 3. The crazy courage Magellan had, the eloquence of Beethoven's misnumbered 5th that still wakes us with its drama and brooding, are each like a hook through history, reaching from another dimension, a place of stories impossible to live but exciting to imagine, maybe in a movie, or when the orchestra announces the first astounding notes of a journey we don't know how to take, despite our rockets, robots, and dismantled yearning. Your life has a limit, but knowledge has none, says Zhuangzi. What begins, ends, a shriek of light around the whole earth like a sleeve. On what planet will we escape ourselves? Now I'm pretty well through this thing. We spent some time talking first. I like that last little set. They're new to me, and they all would deserve more than one oral reading, but that's what happens. And I've never done a reading, and you may not have been at any, you probably have, I have too, where the audience isn't in front of you. So you get that rapport or feeling, and it's kind of odd, but it's a fun adventure. This one is subtitled Polonius's Advice Updated. Now it's called To Thine Own Selves Be True, Polonius's Advice Updated, the original title. You know Polonius giving his daughter what even then was pompous advice in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Shakespeare's generation considered that the older generation, just like always happens. So this one, kind of inspired by my own daughter's going for her year abroad, when I really only gave her one piece of advice, which is in this poem. And the advice was, don't carry any packages across any borders for any boy. That was basically advice. I think that is the single essential advice a father should give a young daughter going off. But anyway, to thine own selves be true. Polonius's advice updated. Try not to owe anything to anyone, kiddo. If you don't pay it back, they'll probably kick your ass one way or another if they're big enough. And consider they already have more money than you, so there won't be a problem finding somebody who is big enough. Don't have sex with anyone you can't name. If you're pissed or stoned, don't try to remember anyone's name until you're not. I don't give a damn if you want to. Come to think of it, vulnerable one, don't have sex at all. But if you must, use protection, even if you believe your partner. Don't be too happy. Somebody will always try to take it away. People always want somebody else's happiness. They don't understand how to get their own, and they don't want to work for it. You can't work for happiness anyway. That kills it. You have to be there when it comes. That brings me to drugs. Above all, don't carry drugs across borders for yourself or anyone. Despise anyone who asks you to. They really don't have your best interests at heart, no matter how good it feels to be trusted. Shun importance of any kind. It leads to nothing that helps. And credit cards suck. Trust me, they do. They're worse than drugs. So it boils down to this. You can't trust people. You can't trust yourself. Both of those can go on for a very long time, maybe a lifetime. If there's no way to avoid any of this, stay glued to your cell phone and don't leave home, which would be a shame because I really want grandchildren to tell these things to, which fortunately I have. So there was a change of mood. And the last two poems, I've done, if I ever write anything that looks sonnet-like, this doesn't, I tend to fall into 13 lines. And so I started to call those broken sonnets, because I'm not trying to write a sonnet, but you find our space. Don't you guys find your space as writers? I like to do different things, and I do, but there's certain things that are natural to you. Maybe they fit in internal space. Anyway, I wrote a couple. I wrote one for Anna Akhmatova. This is a pair to that. It's Broken Sonnet Amichai. Now, do you guys all know the work of Yehuda Amichai? I know some of you do. Craig up there, when I read the terminal poem, I thought I should mention it for Craig, because he travels the world more than any poet I've ever known. I envy him, and he's lived a life doing it. Yehuda Amichai, just quickly, a brilliant, incredible, must-know poet, and a Hebrew poet. Went from Germany to Israel. I've had the pleasure of meeting him and interviewing him a couple of times. He was beloved in Israel because he's the most human poet I've ever, in the class of Neruda or anybody else, and maybe number one for me. His poetry is totally human, every aspect of being human. And he only got known in the rest of the world when Ted Hughes, poet laureate of England, brought him to England to do a week, I think it was, reading his poems on the BBC, and eventually it was published everywhere, because if you're human, he can't not touch you. And I'm not reading his poem. This is sort of inspired by him and to him. And it does quote 2 lines from one of his poems. But I would recommend highly, for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Yehuda, Amichai, Amichai. It's a name he adopted as an immigrant name to Israel in the early days. He gave up his German name, which felt like oppression then, and he adopted a name that means really, Amichai is kind of like love, life rather, and Yehuda is kind of like the Jews live kind of thing. But he told me, anyway, when I talked with him, that he is famous for loving women, and his then girlfriend was a stewardess, as they called them, and he said she named him. He was getting a new name, and he let her pick his name. And then another year or so, they broke up. So he has the name over decades of an ex-lover, gave him his name. But at any rate, I can't recommend highly enough, if I'm bothering you by even suggesting, or if you're interested, Amichai love poems. His love poems cover every aspect of love that isn't sentimental, and real poems that are brilliant in tone. Chana Bloch and Stephen Mitchell, Bloch, did an incredible translation. So I'm going to read this little thing. It has nothing to do except that it's homage to him. Broken Sonnet, Amichai. Possibly because nothing is going right, I turn to a book of your poems, the way a religious man opens a Bible, seeking truth, or the ancients told prophecy through randomness. I open to A Man Doesn't Have Time in His Life, and take the time to read these lines. A man needs to love and hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, which is as true as it sounds impossible. When a poet tells the truth, the world stops for an instant and begins again, a different world. And my last poem is one to my late wife. I didn't go in a tear of writing morning poems after I lost the most essential person and a remarkable human being and woman, as many people know. And I was privileged to get for a year handwritten notes and cards about how she had touched them in innumerable ways, as teacher, as writer, whatever. But I did write this one almost exactly as it's read. And it's a short poem for her. I'd written a few. This one was absolutely 100% real. And I didn't get it accepted right away in the form I did it, but I put it together as a prose looking thing. It did appear in Agni, and it's called Olay. It's about coffee, A-U-L-A-I-T. And I guess lightness has something to do with it too. Olay for Judith. The cup I drink this morning is darker than you'd remember. Milk swirls in it and disappears. The liquid stays dark as if untouched. The hand holding the cup shakes a little. then like a miniature engine revving up. This is the hour of the morning when the dew is still on the trees and the lean, familiar birds dart around one another, flashing green or red against the brew of night and nothing. I will settle into myself. I will enroll again in the myth of morning as a time of new beginning, even without you in this empty kitchen. I will watch the hummingbird's brief assembly. I will fill your feeders with sugar and clear water. To your great advantage, I left out 2 or 3. Thank you for your attention. I don't have the pleasure of watching the delighted or bored faces in front of me, but thank you for being here to hear that. And that is, I will fill your feeders with sugar and clear water, the 2 last promises she wanted me to make her, and I do those. Thank you. Now, do we take a break? Does anybody want to ask me or say anything before we take a little break? Frank and I will engage in attempting to do the magic we did successfully right up until now.
Bravo,
And,
Stan, bravo.
Fantastic.
Bravo.
Yeah,
my dear,
bravo,
dear,
Stan.
my new
Bravo,
friend.
bravo.
Am I allowed to plug your venture?
Oh, Ariel is like.
Am I allowed to mention it?
What?
Your venture?
Oh, no, because we don't know when the next one is yet, so we'll wait.
Keep your eyes out for something called Talking with Our Mouths Full International Poetry Project. They may start it up in the fall. It's remarkable. It brings little groups of 3 or 4 poets from all over the world together to read a poem in a native language,
Yes.
to read it in English, and talk about poetry. It's not formal, it's conversation, it's magnificent. I want to say hello to everybody. Before I take the thing off, I just want to say hello to the wonderful number of people. Frank had said this might be like an old Rockport reunion for you, and in a few delightful ways it is. Sid, it's amazing. A few old friends I'm still in touch with, new friends from our amazing program, the Rainier Writing Workshop. I've been privileged to have 2 gorgeous lives as a teacher. Rockport had so many fabulous writers who went on and still go on to incredible achievement as poets and writers. And the program Judith and I did, we designed every bit of it ourselves, and we redesigned it with input from the adult students. It was a God's gift that we had this opportunity. And everybody who went through it, I think, in our time, has a reverence for it, for that nature, and they're a tight group with each other. It's a wonderful thing. So I see a few of them here, and I'm welcoming you guys. It's nice. Bill Capacir from all over the country. And I'm pleased and honored that you all came. I'm not going to take time to welcome everybody, but I see a few people I don't know, some that might have come over from Talking with Our Mouths Full, some that are in RPS and I hadn't met before. I will say this much, Judith Kitchen and I'm not a joiner by nature. My dear old friend, Bruce Bennett, is on my screen right now. He was one of the founding editors. Judy got him and me in to be editors of the chapbook series. And we had a commemoration of it in Rochester a couple of years ago. I see people, you know, for all sorts of life. Sheila Bender's a dear friend of mine out in these parts and does her own online amazing multi-genre writing venture she's done for years, helping people. Bernie Quetchenbach from the old days, a relative of mine, my own daughter, whom I mentioned, and I wouldn't embarrass her. She's too strong to be embarrassed by that. One line there that I really said to her, if she even remembers so long ago. James Cordero, a fabulous formal poet around the Rochester area. Kathleen Wakefield from Rochester, a fabulous prize-winning poet. So you're honoring me. Thank you very much. Frank, you can take it over and close it, or if you want to give anybody, if anybody has anything you want to say to me at all, it's fine too, but I'm not asking for accolades. I just wonder if there's anything that needs to be good. You all made me feel good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, you mentioned it earlier, for Kim and Craig, do you want to provide people the address so they can get on your mailing list? Your mic is off.
It is remarkable what we poets have done, and I bet all of you know this. You're here now. I did a survey for an article it didn't get used in my review, my essay review I do every year. it wasn't really appropriate. But I did a survey, I kept a folder on how many different things were being done as the pandemic progressed by poets, poetry groups, and poetry institutions. And it was phenomenal. The one I was able to slip into the review with a praise for their Talking with Our Mouths Full, which, believe it or not, was sort of hosted by an amazing woman named Joanne Geer, who runs the Westchester Biotech Research Institute. And she had set up a world platform for research scientists to talk live to one another about their research. And she is such an amazing spirit that she turned to poets. She knew and said, let's do poetry this way. She has music that way. So I love the fact that it brings together our biological threat we all live with. There's always one. We've always come out ahead. These buggers are after us all the time. It's amazing we've prevailed so much to this point. So this virus is after us. We're going to beat it. And she's got the research scientists and the writers, poets, some of them in the same voice. There were some of the scientists in the audience. It's just really remarkable. So if they come back in the fall, look for it. That's it for me. I mean, love you guys. You don't have to hang around for the rest of this.
Frank,
Did you hear me make a comment, or wasn't it on?
Okay. Thank you, Stan.
I have two things to say. One is that I thought it was 3 o'clock. I wouldn't have missed this for anything.
We forgot to put down what time it is, because a lot of my
No,
people,
I did put down the time, but I've been doing things at 3 o'clock several Sundays in a row.
that's too damn early. I'm not even drinking wine. No, the thing is, I'm on the Pacific time, because Frank's used to Rochester Poets. He didn't.
Okay, yeah, but it was my fault. This was not his
Well,
fault.
I mean, there are other people here who may have not even made it because of time
So
zone.
Frank, my question is this going to be rebroadcast at all? I would love to see it.
Yeah, we've recorded this and we're gonna post it just like we did with the other ones.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Stan, I'm
Yeah.
really sorry. I have to wait to respond.
I cut a few of my minimalist things that I think of you when I do them. As you know, we exchange some.
And Stan, to answer your question, because we were all muted.
Yes.
If anyone is interested in Talking with Our Mouths Full, the second series, they can contact us or at craigchury.com,
Yeah,
which
that would
the
be the
spelling of my
easiest
name
way.
is on the box, and that would be the easiest way, craigchury.com. And Talking with Our Mouths Full will enter its second series. We had 8 episodes with poets from Argentina to Lithuania to
Israel.
Morocco, and also Yuda Amakai was a friend of mine and great poet. I carried
I'm not
until his
surprised.
fell apart. So
I'm not surprised. I was privileged to meet him twice and interview him. And he was a man, he spoke metaphor. His natural way of being was metaphor.
what he taught me most was humor, that silliness. He had a silliness in
Silliness
person
and humor.
that
When I say he's this poet in Hebrew and he writes about love, it is real. It's not somber, weighty, romantic. It has all the emotions that you feel.
Thank Dad.
We hate even talking about our program because we were so caught up with your reading.
Thank
Loved,
you. I love the fact that you guys liked it. I made choices as I went because, like anybody, I have had a few too many with me, and I'm really glad that you liked it.
The one that you really sent us into orbit was the one of, running from the Nazis, hiding.
Can you read that again? Would you read that again,
Can we
Stan?
hear that?
I was gladly. I like a self-contained poem, and when you put a reading together, as you know, you want to give some that'll stick. You can't overdo it. I know I wanted to read my little sequence of short takes, but I know you can't really get them just in hearing them, but I really wanted to say them aloud. But I have other poems that'll be even more difficult aloud, not that they're trying to be. You know what I'm
Dan,
talking.
can you hear me?
Yes, I'm going to read it right now. Who's that? Who has a mask on? That's just your icon, right? That's just your icon.
Pardon me, sir.
Who's
Yes.
talking?
Joel Humphrey.
Oh, Joel, I'm sorry, Joel, you got your picture.
Joel, I haven't seen you in a million years.
I'm still here.
Wait,
Anyways, I wanted to tell you, I like your advice you gave to your daughter.
Good. I spent a long time trying to figure out what am I going to read here, and of course, I have some poems that you couldn't possibly get that much out of them just hearing them once, and I risked a couple here. I tried to give you different moods. That one I love. I just love that poem. I wrote it a while ago, but I didn't write it.
I have 9 daughters, and I've given them all the same advice.
You have
so-
what? You have what?
Whoa.
9. Frank's met 3 of them.
Yeah, clarify that, Joel. Those
I don't
daughters.
know, against some prevailing opinion, but I think everybody knows fathers are desperately important to daughters, and they should be there.
Yes.
Let's see, I'm going to read that one poem for you again, which got taken the day I read it for this group last month, which is why I read it in the
Wow,
opening.
what a beautiful coincidence. My God.
It was lovely. Oh, don't believe me, it had been rejected before.
Yeah.
That poem, Cave, I read, the fable thing, maybe I shouldn't have spent so much time explaining it, was taken by a magazine that isn't famous, but I adore. I loved him for taking it. It's called One. You send them one poem. And when he gets 22 poems that he thinks are good enough for his issue, he publishes. And there'll always be some very well-known poets as well as others in there. Okay, I'm going to read this one. Figuring out how to put, I've written, Anne Frank poems, other kind of stuff. Figuring out where to put Hitler, but I knew it read well. It's in little couplets, and I knew it's self-contained, and I knew I could read it well. So thank you for asking it. Evading Hitler. Evading Hitler. The way I do it is to fold my family into a space as small as my breath and hold them inside my body, in the warm pouch of my belly, in the cold pockets of my lungs, as we leave together in the thinnest hour of the night when nobody's watching, or if they are, they can't see us, pass silently as shadows down the secret alleys where you can escape history by becoming invisible, yet your loved ones remain intact, like jewels in an intricate setting. There's no need to worry, so long as I keep running down the unlit alleys where there's nothing to stop me, except the rats and the bodies we leap over as easily as the moonlight sweeping my hair, so it almost seems we're flying. Thank you.
Beautiful, Dan. Beautiful, Stan.
I erred toward newer things in there because I wanted to hear them. You know how good it is to have a chance to read your work aloud, especially if it's newish. It teaches you a lot. All right. Thank you, guys. Kathleen, I've scrolled back and forth across to delight in familiar faces. And suddenly remembering older ones like Paul Humphrey, I know well, but I hadn't seen him forever.
I have a question.
Yes,
What
you're new to
poem-
me. You're new to me.
Hi.
Hi.
What poem? Not that I want you to read the poem, but I want to know the title of the poem that had the consecrating moment of stillness, and you were teaching us about happiness. I really
Yeah,
love that
called
one. Is that-
Someday you'll remember this day as happy.
Thank you.
Still, it's pretty new and it's didn't published anywhere or anything, but how to work the time of it. And that was the key moment in it, that
Yes.
when you remember this consecrating moment, which is important and drags out the line, is this happy? When you can think this as happy, is this happy? What is that? And then I have to end the poem. So it's a genuine meaning to me, and I tried to put it
Lovely.
make a poem out of it. Thank you for that.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Nice to read your work. I've got work here by a number of you, and I'm hoping we can get to it and still have time if anybody wishes, as many of you should, to read a poem of yours. Those who are leaving, old friends and new, you made my heart light after I was extremely bitter with the Google failures right up till this started. Thank you.
Yeah.
Frank, we can go off.
Stan, thanks.
Hey,
Thank you, Frank.
Fantastic.
You're welcome. Anybody wants to stick around
both
for,
of you again sometime again.
Thank you.
hope some of you stick around for the workshop, not the workshop, yeah, the workshop and the open mic if we have one afterwards, if anyone wants to read and share anything. Or you can come back in a bit.
Thank you, Stan.
5 minutes.
Thank
Hi,
you.
hi, Ariel. Hey, Kathleen. Thanks for showing up at the right time. I don't know. We have to talk again.
1 o'clock, but
Good to see you. I know. It looked like what he's going to read for 3 hours. Yeah, I know Stan Rubin. He never shuts up. He's going to read for 3 hours. Ariel, I didn't know your name, but I think maybe were you in Craig's group one time, or
Not that I'm aware of. So
are
I
you in
know
RPS? Are you in Rochester Poetry Society?
I know James and Kathleen. So
Oh, nice. Well, so, yeah, Kathleen mentioned your name to me. I didn't know who it was, and now I know. She meets with you, or nice to meet you.
good to meet you.
I'm not a joiner by nature, but Judith was in the RPS early on, and I went with her a couple times, and they had some amazing people. Cornelius Eady was in it. Then, do you remember the name of John, somebody who went on to be one of our most honored formal poets? Maybe if Bruce is still around, he'd know. John, what? There was a guy, John, in it then, who wrote formal poetry and is really good at it. And he went on to be very significant. I don't know if he became an editor of anything, but he was like in Hudson Review and all these places and had books. A really good lyric poet. So a lot of good poets came through that group in those days. And I was honored to be at Brockport, to be there, and to be able to do a program out here. I mean, so many good writers. Anyway.
Well, Stan, for those who want to participate in the workshop, I'm trying to think if we can post these in chat as Leslie was saying.
Why don't we take a minute and try one more time to do it the way we wanted?
Okay, yeah, sure, we can do that.
The odds are against us, but let's see if it won't work again. Well, who the hell knows? So I'm going to leave right now. I'm leaving the meeting at the moment. No, that's not a good idea. I need to be connected to you. All right, I'm going to try to open the file again.
Don't leave the meeting.
I know. Probably we should start over, but with our luck, the meeting won't reopen. You know. Okay. It's such a bitch because we worked so hard. It was working so well.
Yeah.
But,
We worked for six and a half straight hours last night to get this thing
and the
working.
day before,
And a couple hours the day before, we had it
we all
working.
know what it's like. Yeah, we don't deserve sympathy. It's just that we did work at it. Okay.
Yeah.
The drive just opened. It's
That's the
probably
problem.
not even connected to anything, but I'm going to give.
Somebody said we could screen share. That's not going to work. That's exactly what the problem is, that we're trying to screen share and it's not working. Sadly, that's what we spent
I
some
have a poem up. I'm going to screen share with the poem being up first. Let's see if that does anything. And then I'll try to put the poem. Wait a minute. Screen share. Google Drive.
Okay, go ahead.
Sheila, would you like to read it?
It's crazy, but now I think I can do it. Sorry. I just wanted to say that, oh no, did my chat?
I'm
All
sorry.
right, I'll read. Everyone can still see it because I can't, but I have a Word document. So, okay.
Yeah, I can still see it. Can anybody else?
I can still see it, and the lines aren't wrapped or anything, and I see your stanzas. So
I even see your Word document at the very bottom. Did you just copy that into chat?
I did.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
moving because my internet got unstable. Maybe it'll be better here. Okay, I'll give it a go. And I just want to thank you all for listening ahead of time. This is a really new poem, and I wanted to take the opportunity to show Stan a really new poem. Evening Song, June 2020. In the quiet of pandemic's quarantine, you hear the bird song that drove you once so quickly from the family dinner table to play in hours left of daylight. Hit the penny on the head, pink rubber ball you held a yard from where the penny lay on a crack in your front sidewalk, or other nights hopped big squares your friends had chalked while parents chatted happy on porch steps. Sometimes, if the light lasted, you rode your bike to a seemingly far field, empty and full of possibility. You rode back at twilight to the comforting glow of parents' cigarettes in the coming dark. Today you walk accompanied by music of those birds, so close, so far away. You on deserted streets, masked against the lethal virus, noticing the muju pines in your neighbors' front yards, how thick and dark green this year's spring candles have become, pointing as they do toward an infinite, unpopulated sky.
That's really nice.
Can everyone see it? Then in chat, everybody who's here is seeing it.
Yeah, can anybody not see it?
I can't see it.
Who can't see it?
Denise.
Oh, Denise, I'm sorry, Denise. That's weird. I wonder why not. You're in chat?
Oh, no. Do I have to go to chat?
Yes,
It's in chat.
it's, you just click on the side.
Or wherever you're.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's
got it.
true. It might be someone else.
The
My,
original idea was to be able to not upload, but screen share these from Stan, but that's
With
not working.
the beautiful formatting you did, and then I could highlight or underline, things, but that's neither here nor there now. We failed in the end.
Hats off to you guys for figuring out how to do that.
Well, we obviously, you wouldn't believe the hours over 2 days, and we had it going.
Yeah,
Oh, well, okay.
you should
I
have been
better
here.
comment on the poem. Which is what is it?
I
Okay.
would, because I got an iPad for my birthday 2 months ago, and I still haven't figured out how to use it.
If you realize you're giving up all privacy and your whole life, just accept it.
That's really beautiful, Sheila.
It's beautiful. It reads beautifully. And what I would have noted and will is the beautiful opening. Openings are always an issue because, as we know from practice, but somebody has practiced as many years as I have, still you have to remind yourself of this when you read yourself. The poem needs to open not with fireworks necessarily, or brilliant words, but has to open in a way that makes you want to keep reading it. And that doesn't have as much to do, I would say, with the subject you name as it does from the actual voice, rhythm, sound of the voice, and the words as they set the poem going. So I believe, as I said, a poem creates time, masters time with its duration, like a phonograph record used to. It starts moving and it creates this internal movement of sounds, and you're not aware of it. You're not supposed to be aware of it, but it does it. And this is a beautiful opening. Part of that opening is, she asked me about my one word concept creating. Look at the alternation of short and long syllables, how it creates an internal, non-overwhelming, you don't have to know it's there, cadence, rhythm. In the quiet of pandemics, quarantine. That's like what you call a caesura. There's like a natural little beat. Every little beat, every comma, every space creates that time, the inner texture of the poem's body. I think poems are bodies of sound in the world that are real as well as meaning. In the quiet of pandemics, quarantine, you hear the bird song that drove. Now here she's doing a common thing now of going drove and jamming right to you. That's fine. Drove is a good, powerful ending to keep you going. But I have to say, in the quiet of pandemics, quarantine, you hear the bird song. It's a gorgeous phrase all by itself that drove you once so quickly from the family dinner table to play. Now, a lot of key concepts are entering naturally, like play, family, the past, because it was once. And hours left of daylight, hit the penny on the head. I like how specific she gets, how sharp these specific childhood memories are, which, knowing her latest collection of work, is a quality she has. She can bring up time or the past and then be really specific and convincing about the particulars she's remembered. Hit the penny on the head, pink rubber ball you held a yard from where the penny lay on a crack in your front sidewalk. Or other nights hopped big squares your friends had chalked while parents chatted happy on porch steps. I would say that whole first period, it's one long sentence. Something I tend to do sometimes, the whole poem, is a very long sentence that achieves so much change within it without losing the thread. She's dealing with time travel, memory, parents, specifics, past versus present, which is what a lot of her poetry tends to be about. Pandemics, quarantine, she made that poetic and then matched it with bird song, very different. So the way the vowels play, short and long, So you have the A's in the first phrase, and you have bird song that drove the O's, you once, then quickly. So the alternation of vowels, it's a good poet's ear. Sometimes your ear, even if you're really experienced, as many of us are, as Sheila is, as I am, as many of you are, even then you realize sometimes the ear has to guide you, and you were clubbing the poem to death with too much meaning. Often after a draft, you decide to make it more important by cramming the meaning. And she did a graceful, beautiful opening here. I don't know if she did 100 drafts or just this came to her, but it's lovely. And then I like the specificity, as I said, and I like the way in the second part, it almost has, it goes 14 lines, so it has a look of a certain kind of sonnet, but it's broken into 9 and 5. And it doesn't scan as a sonnet classically, but it has a nice look. I think it's nice. I don't think it's a rule. But I think a way a poem invites you is also to invite your eye if it's on the page. Reading it, performing it, or reading it to yourself alone are different things. And this invites me to read it. And when I read those sounds of the opening phrase inside, it invites me to keep reading. So today you walk, so she's changed here. The today is the time moved. We're here now, we're back to walking. That walking was implicit in the first line. But now she names it. Today you walk accompanied by music of those birds, linking past and present. Very graceful, very nice. The line ends so close that drives us on, just like that drove in the opening part. So far away, which strikes me as one more humble, ordinary, perfectly placed phrase that means a lot in this poem. To me, poems are organized energy. And so every little thing radiates up and down in the poem. You don't pay attention to it, but it's working in a poem. It may be good sometimes if you're working on draft 7 of your own poem, become aware of that. So she has so close, a little beat of moving your eye, so far away. That's really what the whole poem is about. I mean, in a way, certain lyric poems, because they tend to be compressed, have moments that change the poem's significance, what's at stake. And other times you can find a little phrase that's sort of the essence of the whole poem. So close, so far away. You on deserted streets. This is you now, masked against the lethal virus. I like how gracefully, but really she links the second part and the past to the now and the pandemic that she started with. You didn't think you could make a poem that kind of beautiful out of pandemics. He even uses quiet. What a simple word, but it matters because down here it's deserted streets. Now we all know why if we know we're in the pandemic. Masked against the lethal virus. How do you pronounce the name of that pine, Sheila? Are you there, Sheila? Her mic is
from India, and I just have heard gardeners call it Muji.
good. I looked it up because I wanted to know, and I couldn't get a name of a tree, but it is an Indian name that refers to various, it's definitely an Indian name, I thought. And then you have your neighbor's front yards, which again, I know her work and I know she's a poet of space and of the past and present. So it matters that there's your neighbor's front yards. It's like the last part makes certain substitutions as well as connections for things in the first part. She had her parents' front porch, she had familiar neighborhood. Now she's back alone in hers, and there's a neighbor, front yards of neighbors. They're not populated, but they're comforting, they're known. How thick and dark green this year's spring candles have become. Time, this season, and again, specific. Thick and dark green spring candles. And then she continues, pointing as they do toward an infinite unpopulated sky, which speaks loudly, doesn't it, in this poem? The unpopulated, seemingly infinite sky compared to the past that kind of is part of where you live in your space, your current space, the immediate space you're walking in, the space of pandemic.
Yes.
Of an empty street that should have people. So she ends with that. I think this achieves a lot of things gracefully. I don't have anything to critique about it. You might think of, when I first read it the first few times, I wondered if I wanted to suggest as they do isn't needed, but I think it's beautiful. Pointing to an infinite unpopulated sky is sort of too overtly making a symbol out of it. You kept the voice, the meditative voice of the poem, pointing as they do toward an infinite unpopulated sky. I like the way that last phrase comes in at the end. So that's a lot of time on that, but I give you a lot of praise, Sheila. I don't know. Sometimes we can write these almost as a gift. Others, we work a hell of a long time. We have to get rid of 50 lines to get there, but you did a good thing. Let's move on to another one. Does anybody else have something
No,
post
I
there?
wanted to tell Sheila how much I love that apocalyptic, infinite unpopulated sky. I think that's so wonderful. That's
Yeah. It
yeah,
kind of does point to complete annihilation as an undercurrent. I didn't even say.
Yes.
You know, what I like about it, to sum up, is just how well it all works together with basically unpretentious language. It doesn't ask for a lot. I like poems that earn, you know, the impulse to write a poem about politics or saving the earth or an animal or fire, and to start with it.
Sheila, I had a tech question here. How did you get that poem to come up? Did you just copy and paste it?
I did. I opened my Word document
Okay.
and I copied it and pasted it into chat.
Oh, all right. I was wondering because I thought I saw that Sally down below has sent me privately, which I guess wasn't intentional, to her 2 poems, but all I can do is download them. I can't really share them. So that
She could resend them to everybody.
well, yeah, that's what I meant. Either everyone would have to open them individually, or Sally, you can just copy the contents and
They
paste.
could all do it, yeah. Frank will check to be sure they all came through.
Yeah. Before that though, Leslie had sent a poem earlier, and where the heck is it?
Which poem is it? Have a different name on it? Do I?
No, she sent
Yes.
it.
Yes, it does.
I had copied it, but where the heck is?
Is the
No,
name?
the name is Akua.
Right. I
Yes.
want to say something about both your poems, and one of which I completely love, but I want to say something about it too. I have this idea. But I'm going to start by looking at the quality of mercy. Does everybody have that? Can they open it?
Frank, can you send it, or do I need to cut and paste it?
I was going to copy and paste it myself. But
Great.
oh, wait, here it is. Here
I
it
did
is.
a hell of a lot to it on my own copy of it. Now I'm glad.
I just wanted to send it to you. I wanted to send it publicly, not privately.
Yes, send it. Just pick to everyone.
I don't have that option. It says
In chat.
yeah, on my chat. Oh, to everyone in me. I'm sorry, Leslie.
Right.
I'm sorry. My apologies. My
That's
apologies.
okay.
I thought that was another option off to the side.
No.
Everybody sends theirs. That way we can be quicker about it than like we would have been the other way.
Right.
Did that come through technical difficulties? I'm sorry, I didn't copy and paste it properly. Can you copy and paste it, Leslie?
All right.
I
Hold
can't
on.
believe this, Frank.
Yeah. Sorry.
I can't believe what we've been through. This. All right.
Oh my God, it's one thing after another.
I have, if you could see what I have in front of me, this is how I work. I have scribbled a ton of things on this, circled things. I wasn't going to show all that. I was just going to be able to underline or highlight something, you know? So, but I want to share with you a couple thoughts on this poem, and everybody should see it. I'm not going to ask you to read it. I want you to read the other one.
Okay.
Highlighted it.
I have some thoughts on this. I'm not going to tell you how to write it. I don't do that. That's why I think I'm a pretty good reader for people. But I am going to give you my sense of it, having read it a few times. And you can, you know, make your own choices, obviously. I respect anybody's poem because you don't even know where they are in their own poetry writing. You don't know what it means to them. You don't know how they worked at it. You can't. You have to respect what's in front of you. But I do have to share with you my reading of it, my reading of it. So I will do that.
I'm sorry.
Try it again.
Did you copy it, Leslie?
I copied it. For some reason, something is not letting me paste it.
Yeah, I'm running into the same thing. I'm running into the same thing. How
I
did
had the same problem.
I'm sorry?
I had the same problem. I couldn't paste.
I'm
How
sorry.
did you do it, Sheila? Did you do something special?
Sheila may be gone.
Oh, did Sheila leave? Oh,
She's
no,
a busy person, and having done her poem, she's probably
Frank,
gone.
I'm here.
Frank, when I sent it to you, I just copied and pasted. Now, as I'm trying to send it to everyone, it's not working.
Oh, no.
I wonder,
Wait a minute, if you sent it to me, then why could everybody see your poem?
No, only you saw my poem, Frank.
Are we
Only-
talking about Sally's poem?
No, I'm talking about your poem, Sheila.
Oh, I just copied from my Word document.
Right.
Copy and paste. But now I've received Sally's as a Word document, which
Yes,
I,
right.
and I opened it just fine. So
We're all having trouble doing what you did, which is copying into copy to everyone in chat.
I don't know, one of those mysteries. But
Do we sacrifice a cat? No, I like cats. Something to gods of Google have to have a sacrifice burn incense.
God.
Is anybody here a shaman or a member of one of the Irish orders, mystical? Pagan? No, not a pagan. That's the wrong thing to say. Because they don't automatically do magic.
Oh, is this protected view? Oh, is that it? React.
Okay.
Other people said they had the same problem.
Frank, you did such a lovely job formatting.
I know. Zoom is telling me that it's pasted, but I'm not seeing it.
What?
So that's weird too. Let me.
Oh my God. Yeah. We're cursed. I've got it, but
The only thing I can think of is to put it into, oh my God.
I've got Ariel's poem that
The only
she's.
thing I can think
I
of
see Ariel's.
is to copy it. I'm sorry, somebody can see it now?
I see Ariel's, but I have to open the document.
I can't see they're just coming up for me under chat, and they're not all formatted though. I can't see a quiz, but I have a perfect copy of it on my own folder that we planned to paste.
Oh.
So I can go over saying something about it. I'd like her to maybe read the. I'd like everyone to see it, but
Yes.
I don't know how much time people want me to take or us to take on this at the moment. I have some very positive things to say about this, but I also have some suggestions.
I want the critique. That's why the work I submitted is both brand spanking new. And so I thought it was so exciting. Okay, so I sent the document.
You took a difficult subject on that probably I will dare to say.
Well, we can just, Leslie, I guess we can just read your poem the way you've got it. I don't know why we can't seem to.
Okay, so.
How did you manage to paste that? Oh, you sent it to me privately.
Okay, so now I'll do it again to everyone. Now that I know that works. Here we go, everybody. The Quality of Mercy.
Oh, I thought it was someone you knew.
Do we have time for her to read both her poems aloud? I was only having one poem read for the sake of time. I think it's probably
just a question of people's.
Yeah, I want her to read the other one aloud for a reason, but this one is really more of a performance. This probably has value added if it's read aloud.
The Quality of Mercy does, I think.
Yeah, it's more of a performance.
Yes, it is.
I'm only getting the Quality of Mercy as a download, not as a paste.
I couldn't get it to cut and paste, but I could get it as a download. So it's in Word, everyone, and I use the current Word. It should be safe.
Oh, God.
Does everybody have Word or something you can open a Word document?
Yep.
Yes.
You guys are hanging on are probably RPS people who want to have your chance to read your poem. But I have to say, if you want a chance to me to respond, I'm grateful. And I've read them several times each and scribbled all over them for me. Used a yellow highlighter here or there. And you know the story, you know what we're fighting here because you've been through it probably, but it just galls me to remember how easily we were both able to do that last night. It would be nothing. I could interact, you could interact with it. But anyway, all right. I'm going to ask when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Frank, you tell me judiciously, when does it make sense to say, if you haven't been able to open it by now, you can't open it. We're just going to have her read it and Stan will respond.
Well, if everybody has got Word or Open Office or something, they can just open the document that was sent to us by Leslie or Sally or whoever. Just download it and open it. Has anybody been able to do that?
Yes.
I've got it. Yeah.
Can we, does anybody not want us to go on? I mean, because you're still working and hoping to get it, or you know,
Has
somebody's.
anybody not been able to get the document downloaded?
I don't see where it is. Is it in chat?
It's in chat.
It's in chat, yes.
I don't have it in my chat.
It says the Quality of Mercy, Doc X, Leslie White, and then,
No, the last thing I have are comments from James Cordiero.
I'm just before that.
Comment from Ariel. No, I don't
Might be
have
able
it at all.
put it in a Word, you can cut and paste it. Yeah, that's a good idea, James, if it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, James. The cut and paste stopped working.
I'm not even opening it in Word. I'm opening it in a you know, one of the Word clones. That whatever. Actually, I don't even know how I don't even have Word on. It's really weird.
Do you see it as a little box in the bottom left of chat, and then you have to click on it to open it?
No,
Nobody's
I don't have it.
I'll try cut and paste one more time.
I'm not even using Word. Why am I getting those error messages? I'm using LibreOffice.
I see. Do you see Ventura, the boss finds a heart, quality of
No.
mercy? Oh, so you're not seeing anything in chat.
I'm not seeing anything past James's comments.
It's right after James's comments.
No.
I'm in between two of James's comments. And then Sally Ventura to everybody, and then James's comments. Oh, okay, James. Sure, James, you can try and paste it. Thank you.
Where's James?
James said it worked for him. Would I like him to try and paste it into
hi,
chat?
James. Are you still there? Does it work? Maybe you can paste
Thank you.
So I just have a silly thing to say. Maybe the chat box, the scroll bar on the right where you scroll down, are you sure that you, person who can't see these, are you sure that you've scrolled all the way down so that you're seeing the full number of
one new message?
chats?
It worked for me. Would you like me to try to paste it in the chat? Yeah, James, please paste it in the chat.
I don't have it. I've scrolled all over. I don't have it. Why don't you just read it and we could hear Stan's comments? Because
James, did you paste it in the chat? I don't see it.
No, I don't see it.
Wait a minute. Let me. Oh my God, my scroll bar seems to have stopped. Oh.
Well, the last thing I see is at 3:38. So.
Yeah, I see.
And it's now 3:40.
I don't even see a timestamp.
No, I don't have a timestamp. So.
Where?
Something's.
They were flashing. There you go. They're flashing off and on for some reason. There you go.
Oh, I see. 3:38. Yeah, that's the last thing I see. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
James is saying no, he can't cut and paste, but the document is there for those who can open the document.
Yeah, I've got the document, of course. Stan's got the doc. Where does Stan go?
Letter for help.
Stan got.
There it is. James did it.
How'd you do it?
James did it. Thank you, James.
Oh, now I.
Yay!
Yay, James.
Yay, James. Why can't we hear you, James? Thank you.
James, you got your mic turned off for some reason.
James, thank you.
Has to unmute. Oh, well.
It should be working now.
Okay.
He
Ariel, do you
unmuted.
have yours in a doc file?
Thank you.
All right. Equality of mercy.
So is Stan here?
Where Stan went. Stan!
Stan got tired of us.
Bathroom break, maybe?
He took a bathroom break. I don't know. I can't believe it. Oh my God.
James, how did you do it?
Yeah, what'd you do?
I just marked it with my mouse.
Yeah.
Copy and paste.
That's what I.
That's what we've all done.
That's what we.
That's what we've been doing.
That's what I was doing, but anyway.
I don't know if the whole thing is there.
The very first poem I
Oh,
read may have been too obscure because I didn't name that it was about Amazon deliveries. Well, while we were,
Yes.
the bell rang, went, Amazon guy gave me the box. I took it in, I opened it, I saw that it's paper, and I thought, gee, I got an order of paper last week. Then the bell rang again. He said, I gave you the wrong order.
Whoa.
So I said, look, man, no gloves, but I don't have the virus. And here it is, and no pants. He said, I've seen it all. Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
so
Okay.
now what happened? Now we've got
Just get back to full screen.
who's
It's
sharing,
gone.
who's sharing their screen?
You were viewing Diane.
It just went black. It's,
Oh, you were viewing Diane. Oh, Diane, how did you do that?
how did you do that?
I went to my word processor and exported it to Zoom,
Oh my God.
but I wasn't meaning to have it showing on the screen. I thought
That's
it
where
would
they're
go
all
into
supposed
chat.
to be.
How do you export it to Zoom?
You go to export. I have Pages in Apple.
Oh, I
You
don't
go
have.
to you go to export, transfer it into a Word document,
Yeah.
and then you scroll along where to export it, and it said export to Zoom.
Oh my God.
Oh,
And this is what happened, which I wasn't actually planning at it happening right now. But
This is what Stan and I spent all this time trying to do
well,
yesterday.
it's not, we can't control it. I mean, I was just going back and forth, poem after poem, but this is great because it's up there. I can't do anything to it. I'm not going to on the screen. But I want to go back to Akua's poem.
Yeah, let's go back to
Okay.
Leslie's poem.
Can we do that without losing this? Take it down and put it back up when we're ready
No,
for her?
I think that has.
I have her poem open
Yeah.
on chat now.
Great.
No, Leslie's poem's still there.
No, but
It's-
Leslie has completely taken over my screen, so I can no longer see my own.
No, that's
Oh,
not Leslie's poem.
That's not Leslie.
No, it's
Sorry, I
mine.
mean, Diane's.
Oh, it says stop share.
Stop share.
Yes.
Let me do that.
Yay.
Okay.
Now I've got.
Yeah, now we're back.
Wow, I'm sorry for this.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all.
I think maybe you, on second thought, you should read this one, and I have things to say about the other one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I don't know how you did that, but I guess we'll have to look around.
I don't either. It's the first time I've ever tried it. So
What made you export? Oh, you saw export to Zoom. I see what you mean.
yeah.
You just clicked on the document and then where did you see export?
On my word processor, it says export, and then I had to change it into Word format.
Yeah.
And then scrolling along, you know how you can send it to an email or whatever, and then
Right,
it says
right.
export to Zoom or send to Zoom. And I clicked
Weird.
on that and it took over the whole screen. So
Jesus.
I wasn't expecting it.
I've got
But
share to email, and never mind. We can figure that out later. I just,
Yeah, let's
it's
just.
just amazing. I don't
yeah,
know.
why don't we do Leslie's poem?
I'm sorry, Leslie. We've held you up here. Sorry.
No, well, we're all in this together.
You're
So,
so excited. You're so excited to see that appear. Okay.
okay. So, as I was saying, this is brand new. I've been asked any number of times, as you might guess, lately from folks who know that I'm an African Caribbean American poet to comment. And I resisted it, but finally, this is what I'm, finally I said, I got to say something. And this is one of them. So, the quality of mercy. Unrepentantly eager. We can see their faces in this unbearable trauma, this recurring wound deep in our roots, in our founding, deep in the making of what we are, grim determination, grinning execution, this unexamined illness of wayward duty, violent, hideous, runs deep beneath and sprouts persistent, undoing, unmaking, corrosive rust on the mechanism, results in derailment as democracy jumps its rails and traumatized consciences rally. Pinned to the ground by one rogue, we thought, we now see 3 officers kneeled across his back as he lay on his stomach, handcuffed, helpless, calling to his mother, saying his goodbye, saying he could not breathe again and again, crushed on concrete. We've seen this before. We know this travesty, asking to be let up. Distraught onlookers call for mercy, call for cessation, call for his release there on an ordinary day street. When others called finally arrive, he is pulseless for 20 lousy bucks, a suspected counterfeit bill for 20 stinking bucks, death by torture in broad daylight for 20 lousy bucks. You know those guys. You danced with them at the prom. You dated them. They're on your team. They shop where you shop. They live next door, these ravening uniformed killers documented as they casually dispense destruction, calling for justice. Thousands protest everywhere across this ailing country. Police in riot gear respond with force, tear gas, rubber bullets assail the mourning crowd. Rubber bullets batter the mourning crowd. Bullets pierce the mourning crowd of witnesses, and more die.
Oh, so glad that I realized belatedly this one has to be read aloud. It's what it's for. You're very good, and you read it. The reason
Thank you.
the way you read it too, because it shows that everything here is sculpted. The voice, body of this poem comes from you, and you're shaping it all the way. It was read beautifully, and it brought out the strength of the poem. I really don't have a critique of it then, except I will offer some comment, which is,
please.
You took on, I was going to say this anyway, you took on a subject that probably at this moment for today, 100 or 1,000 poems are being written or have been, which is gutsy, but maybe you do it just because I have to respond, as you said.
Right.
On the other hand, you gave us something powerful in its own right with its own body. It isn't just the material or the statements, it's the way, it's the language, the way, the rhythms, the whole thing. Very, very strong. I love the fact that with this topic, you start with a nice title that gives us a slightly, creates a slight suggestive framework for the poem, that there's a larger thing at stake, both that has a literary echo,
Hope so.
but also it's something larger than any politics, any event, any atrocity. So I like that as a title because it invites us to have to take that into thread that into the poem, what the poem is saying. That's clever because sometimes people will resist a bit, wanting to feel responsible or guilty, and it's a nice title. I like the way you start it, unrepentantly eager. That's a wonderful phrase. It's powerful start, it's not a quiet start, but unrepentantly gets the ear. It's 5 syllables, maybe. Unrepentantly eager, the short two, and a comma. So that's like, it gets energy going. And it's a good phrase. It's not predictable. Probably it's been said before, everything has or written before, but I can't think of it as anything vaguely familiar, but it works immediately. So it quickens my ear and my mind. Unrepentantly eager. The R sounds very nice. We can see, then you immediately direct us physically, their faces in this unbearable trauma, in this recurring wound. My very first instinct would be to say, well, a trauma is unbearable, but I instantly, when I read this poem, said, no, she means unbearable. The sounds of it matter. Unbearable trauma. And then you start repetition, which is so strong. And some of the poets you probably read and like, as I do, are brilliant at this kind of thing, repetitions. And you do a wonderful job with it. Our roots are founding deep. The way the vowels gave bursts of energy to phrases that coupled to other phrases and moved it on. It was really a very, very fine reading of a fine, strong poem. Now,
I never expected that.
without hearing it read aloud or wanting it to, I had the instinct or impulse or response that when you come down to that, either it could end, and many poems could end over and over again, it could have ended something like, there on an ordinary day, on an ordinary street, or on an ordinary street, and it would end. But that would be a different poem. It wouldn't be the oral poem I realize this is. So then you have the 20 lousy bucks, 20 stinking bucks, 20 lousy, that repetition with variation is strong. Death by torture in broad daylight. On one level, that repeats simply ordinary day, ordinary street, but it repeats it with more force. You're trying to drive it home. It repeats it in a different way. I like very much all by itself, my minimalist impulse, the next 5 lines. This is not a suggestion to take them out or to do anything to them, just pointing that they stand by themselves as a poem.
You know those guys?
You know those guys, and the voice is absolutely a direct person talking. It's not the slightly more rhetorical voice of the spoken performed poem.
Yeah.
You know those guys. You danced with them at the prom. That's fantastic that you could come to that from this larger reiteration and almost chant-like complaint about what happened in your agony. You know those guys. You dated with them. You danced with them at the prom. That's devastating. You dated them. They're on your team. They shop where you shop. They live next door. Those ravening uniformed killers. Well, of course, that's really laying into them, but it fits the poem. It fits what the poem is saying. Ravening uniformed killers documented as they casually, I might make that present tense, even if that seems illogical, as they casually dispense destruction, because the film and video are always present tense.
Right.
That's the one little thing I would do. Calling for justice, thousands protest everywhere. And you got a lot out of that. I don't really think it's essential.
Use that feature, but I'm just
You're ending the description of the entire event, so I applaud you for achieving an enormously ambitious thing. You didn't just express anger about it. You didn't just recall the scene. You went all the way through the other cops, the calling for justice, the protests. You did like the whole history of that moment in one page, or a page and a bit. And that's quite an accomplishment. It's terrific. However, it's always possible to play with its overall shape and not have that last part. I'm not saying you have to take it out, but it's always possible. Because once you do, you know those guys, you dance with them, you have made something so personally powerful.
Oh, I
real.
love that. I like that suggestion to end with, as they casually dispense destruction.
And that really,
versus with the crowds.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, first of all, one of the difficulties with this kind of thing to make a lasting poem is we all know it on one level. So you're reinventing it, you're reestablishing it as art in a way to make us feel it or see it the way you'd like. And I think when you end with that fabulous, you danced with them at the prom, as they casually dispense destruction. And that's the last phrase that would leave you. You know what I'm saying? I really think it's a quite strong.
That's such a great thought. Thank you.
Among the million poems being written, some will be stronger than others. Many of them will be stronger performed. Many performed to an audience that already is on the same emotional side will be very strong. But I'm looking at this more like one that could actually, as the better ones will, go beyond this moment.
Yes.
And it's that last stanza as we now have it that really pins that down. The 20 stinking bucks, the voice is in the poem forever. That's the achievement.
Yeah.
The achievement. I'm not against poems doing anything. Poems can be political for the moment. Poems can be therapeutic. They all are in some way. Poems are more like diary entries you got out of your system. But I like the idea of making art simply meaning. It could be read a little later or a lot later. It still have power. It's got the power into it. And you did through voice, shape, stanza, sound. And it is a much better poem than I thought. I thought it was strong and promising, but I thought I might try to tell you to cut some of it and maybe.
Yeah.
It worked. Once you started reading it, I realized this is meant to be said aloud, period. Now I would never read it without hearing you.
No.
So it's really terrific. Of course, it has anger in it. In a certain way, it's polemical, but not in a way that steps over any line. You fill out every feeling in it, every statement in it, even the most bitter or accusatory ones, are filled with an earned emotion of the voice you have unfolded through it, if you understand what I'm saying. It's a tricky thing to say, someone, particularly I don't know you. I'm not saying you shouldn't be writing about this with or without your particular background. But I am saying you did art out of it. You made a
Thank you.
performance out of it. And I really commend you. And I'm really happy that I like it much better now than when I was reading it alone. And I was going to say something about the other poem, just to comment on it. The other one I thought was, if I had to choose, a stronger poem, and maybe on the
I
page,
think so too. What, you know,
on
I
the
love,
page it is.
I tend toward forms. So
Right.
it's,
I like that about you. You're really smart as a poet, because what you did there wasn't just an oral response, powerful. It was a poem, whatever that means. I'm not here to judge everything, although I hate people thinking you can't judge anything when that's all they do anyhow. The people who say, oh no, you can't judge anything, get to know them for 30 seconds or
right.
listen. They're judging everything. They're judging all
Right.
past people who ever lived.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's a human lie. And I instinctively, politically, as a writer and as a human being, I feel lucky that since about age 6, I have had a little detector that does not like things that aren't, whether I agree with them or not, that aren't dealing with the real human.
Authentic.
You don't get it lost in anybody's ideology, anybody's political program. Of course, there's a place for that. But I want thing to sound like a human being said it for a human being to respond to. And you did that there on the difficult topic. I'm sure many others are doing that. I haven't seen all the poems that are going to come out of this, but there's going to be a lot of poems, and I like that. And let's look at your other one, which is more the formal poet who has more awareness of that too. Now, I was going to suggest a couple things to you. I'm sure we like some of the same poets. I have no doubt. I adore Lucille Clifton, but she's not June Jordan, and you must
I knew them both.
Good. I was lucky enough to know Lucille Clifton personally. She even gave me a poem, and my wife, when we were married, she gave us a poem about they want me, I'd be remembering my own memories or something. They want me to remember their memories. I'd be remembering my own memories. So it's a little too. I love that she could get something in a couple lines that would drive in. But anyway, having said that, this poem I thought was better, but the one you just read is tremendously strong in its own way. Now this one, somehow you knew, I do have some suggestions I think might make it better on the page where it seems to have its primary residence. And what happens when I get a draft this strong, and many of these drafts were pretty strong, you want to respect the draft, but you don't want to let, if you can help, you don't want to let it off.
Go ahead.
We're talking about somehow you knew, right?
Right.
Yeah, I really regret that they can't see the beautiful formatting you did where they all look so readable. But I can't, got to get that out of my head. That's why I'm drinking wine already, even though or I wanted to start drinking wine, but I didn't early this morning. But when we couldn't make this work, I fought the urge. This is a human speaking voice. Could you perhaps read this once? It's short to read.
Somehow you knew. Somehow you knew that's not the way that you would die, as all sense and wayward fates you defied, dashing across crazy traffic streets against the red. That moment before a car's impact, or so I thought, and more I feared you would smile to me from the other side and say, come on, come here. You wild, wondrous thing, I miss you, mommy. Though you disliked them, your voice, a bird in spring. How I wish you never, ever had to go so suddenly. I wish you were ever here and always near, perpetually teasing me to try, defy, to dare.
Give them a second for that to sink in. It's just, first of all, beautiful homage to a mother. It is beautiful. You learn things in life if you actually have an open mind and spirit. And I've never said this, let alone publicly, only one. But one thing men should learn if they acquire the wisdom of a man in a way, I mean, if they live, is that you never mess with a woman's relationship to her mother. One of the primal forces of nature, and I've seen it as anybody who's lived long enough, known and been friendly with women. I have been blessed by what sometimes felt like a curse when I was like a high school, by never thinking that women were anything but real human beings. which also means I don't think anything a woman says is automatically true. I don't think all women can't lie, cheat, steal, or and I know the people who taught me that through my whole life were women who knew that. So I didn't fall in line ever when men became suddenly feminist and anything a woman said. So I studied the Victorian era in graduate school, and I understand that no, she's not an angel. She's a real human being. So that's something you didn't ask for. I've never said to an audience before, but this is a beautiful homage, and I'll let the women with mothers respond to it themselves. It comes right across to anybody. I'm not big on the idea that nobody can understand your feelings except somebody of your exact gender, race, or experience. There's some little truth to that. There's a lot of things, but if you can't understand anyone else's writing from within you as a human being, then there's really no point. Why would I pick up her work? She's not me. But that's why we have writing. It doesn't mean you're supposed to lie about your experience or your background or anything. It just means some of us have stopped honoring in the universities, particularly, I would say, the fact that what literature does is reach across barriers and share each other's insides and teach you things you didn't know or feel. But that's enough of my lecture.
I just wanted to move on for a sec here, or keep things back on track. Sally, there's 2 poems you submitted. Is there one you wanted to do first?
The proctor at the state exam.
Proctor.
Okay, yeah, that's the one that should be done.
I did find a way to copy and paste.
Oh, cool. That's a good poem. I want to say something to her about this poem. Maybe my little polemical moment of her sermon. Here's the thing. This poem is I think could use a little bit of pruning and shaping. This draft could use a little bit to free up what's in it. Now, when you know this, because you're a pretty smart poet. I don't know how long or when you've written. We don't have the time to do that now in a workshop. I'd ask you to talk about it. But the thing is, it's a paradox. You better enjoy it. I used to tell students, if you don't like revising, you're in the wrong game. But you got to love it when you realize a thing can be different. It can look different.
Yes.
So liberating what it is that you didn't know it would be, even when you think it's there. Even when your friends will say, man, that's what amazing. Going over it and realizing if any time you write something strong, a poem is like a living thing.
Structure.
Energy back and forth, though. Structure, yes, but it isn't that. It's a living field of energies. Anything reflects back and forth. And we all learn, I think, if we can listen to ourselves, that when you have an amazing thing happens, maybe it was a gift, you didn't work for it at all. It's an amazing phrase. This is the perfect thing to say. That makes it a little tricky when you go past it. Doesn't mean you should end there, but it suddenly changes the distribution of energy, stuff you might have done. Because sometimes the right statement or the right image or the right metaphor or the right tone says a lot more. Everything radiates and says more than it's saying if it's working. So then you have to rethink it. Now that's not what this does. This isn't full of holes or anything. I'm just going to suggest that to liberate the voice in it.
Do you want to read that, Sally? We got it up now.
Yeah, no, wait a minute. I'm going with her here, okay? Are you hearing me? I'm talking to Akua and everybody about her other poem.
Oh.
Akua, what I'm going to suggest here is that the opening is so strong. Somehow you knew that's not the way you would die. That's terrifically strong. The energy that gets going in that simple statement goes quite a way. It's traveling on. So then your job is not to interfere with it or distract us. I think the third line I would just take out. Okay. I know it's an important statement. It characterizes her, but it takes us out a little bit, just a little bit away from the movement you've already got going so strongly with that unpretentious voice. Somehow you knew that's not the way that you would die. We want to get to that, and then dashing across crazy traffic streets against the red. That's the right follow through. You know what I'm saying? That
yes,
moment
I do.
Before a car's impact, which follows through on that moment you're invoking. Then I think, or so I thought, and more I feared, that's just a distraction from the poem itself.
Got you.
And you didn't have the poem till you put it there. We don't know these things till we looked at the draft. I might take I feared and make it be the opening of the next line. I feared you would smile to me from the other side and say, come on, come here. That's tremendously strong. That's a little bit of the fear of the mother's recklessness any kid would have. You might admire the mother, you might be in awe of the mother. You might be desperately afraid of the mother at moments.
Freaked out by the mother.
Yeah, that's just part of the reality of being a kid. I mean, and it's funny as a parent, there'll be one moment or one thing you did that they will never forget. You say, I didn't even remember. So that's how it is. I would tend, this is only a matter of your own sensibility, because this is fundamentally destined for the page, is in no way essential. I would tend to think of italicizing her voice there. Come on, come here.
Like that, thank you.
A little bit like a witch's voice or a voice from another realm, calling
siren, a siren, yes.
Right, she's calling me from this safe place.
Right.
I didn't believe my mother would die that way, but it scared me. The reason you didn't believe it is obviously because you already see her as somebody dangerous, but has some magic powers of survival.
Yes.
So then you have I feared has more significance. And then you have come on, come here. And that could end there. It would be an amazing poem that says everything. But I don't mind if you want to go on to the actual homage to her. You wild, wondrous thing, which in a way is rhetorical overreach, but it's wonderful. Whoever, you wild, wondrous thing, really you said it all. But I miss you, mommy. Again, somebody would say, don't do that, don't get, a poem is what it is. Art does what it has to do. And it's not the same poem if we take that childish language out of it, if we take how I wish you never had to go, you teasing me to try, to defy, to dare. But I will say this, I think it's stronger without the last stanza, because you've already got that whole message in there. Now I admit, with your love for her and the magical place she occupies in your imagination, you might feel the need to put that in there. But I would say when a poem reaches a certain level, and this one is, it can be really, really fine. Sometimes you have to sacrifice. You know the cliche they use on,
yes.
Kill your darlings.
Yep.
And I don't use it. I mean,
no, that's
you have
how,
to be able to
thank you.
recognize, and it's my taste, but I'm very experienced, but it doesn't make me right. Take the line out I suggested. If you take the line out,
I agree with that totally.
you know what you have there? You have 2 3-line stanzas that I will argue sound better, are more compressed, that have more impact.
Yeah.
And really say it all, because it ends with, come on, come here. You're worshiping your mother's amazing ability. You're also afraid that it will cause your death as much as hers.
Absolutely.
That's the poem, and I think that is a fabulous poem if you want to see it that way and hear it that way.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's move on to Sally.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you for giving me that word. Let's move on to Sally. You know what I used to tell students, because it's true, maybe it's worth everybody thinking because you know it. When you write out of your parents, I used to have to tell undergraduates or beginners or anybody, no, you're not going to do justice to your mother that in this poem, or catch every aspect of your father. All you're going to do is get that one moment where your father was sitting in his easy chair. That's the moment. Maybe you're going to write these poems for the rest of your life to try to get you'll never get your mother out of your system, but you're not.
I have been.
The trouble with that is people try abstractions and too much to get it all in with the mother and realize, my God, what a blessing she is to me. I can write about her forever. All right, let's move on.
I just have a question here. It has nothing to do with the next poem. There's this thing from James. It says Heartwood, Ariel, Rudolph, Hartwick, and then it says for my mother. Is that your poem, Ariel? I'm confused.
Yes, that's my poem, but I think part of it didn't come through, so.
Okay,
I'm not able to paste. I don't know what the magic is there.
Okay, I've got the PDF. I think I might be able to get it, but I was just curious what that was.
I pasted the second half too separately because I saw it got cut off, so it may be there.
Okay.
I don't know if it's showing up or not.
Okay.
Sally's do we have up?
Anyway, I guess we could, for now, we can move on to the proctor at the final exam from Sally.
The poem I particularly liked for various reasons, including the subject she took on. You know, sometimes subjects are, nobody's going to take them on. By the way, I wanted to mention to Akua, so that's to everybody, there is a poet named, I have to pull this out and see if I have it here. Yes, there's a black poet with that named John Murillo. Brand new book, Murillo.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
He is literally unbelievable.
He
comes from Oakland. He was a rapper then. He's off the street, and he got so smart about poetry. If you've read him or seen interviews with him, he talks about, no, nothing's wrong with getting an MFA. He is so smart and knowledgeable and so many good instincts about poetry, but like he has a sonnet sequence basically about a riot. He can do street talk, he has political, but he knows poetry too. I've almost never anybody read someone whose work so combines knowing and loving poetry with the reality.
Yeah.
Of it. And the book is called Contemporary American Poetry, with all the K's that we guys from the 60s find as rather old hat as a protest comment, but it makes a statement. Contemporary American Poetry. John
I'll
Marie,
check it out.
I wanted to mention to you, particularly to you, but everybody. There's a poet named, you may well know, Danusha Lameris. 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 She's from, her mother's from Barbados, I think, from the islands. And she was born in the States. She is, some might find her, some don't love her. They find her a little too positive or a little too easy. She is an absolutely magnificently gifted lyric poet. His poems just take you from anything. Sitting on the front steps, I meet a child of a friend in a store, and she just can take you somewhere. And it's usually very life-affirming without being sweet. So she's worth looking at. And there's a tough poet whose book I just reviewed. First book up in Minneapolis by a Somali poet named Ladan Osman, Osman, which is a really, I think, brilliant, difficult book because she writes line by line. Sometimes you have no idea how meaning is going to come to these lines or where it's going to go. But the entire book is almost like the interior autobiography of somebody who has to deal with being an immigrant without dealing with that in a, in a diary way, but it's like an inner diary. And she just had a big breakup with her husband at the opening, and it's like lashing knife blades. It's a brilliant book, I think. And she's gotten some criticism too from people saying, well, she's not being political enough. And I'm thinking, how could you possibly read this and not understand? And it's called Exiles of Eden. And she has a poem about walking the beach in Somalia with her mother during war, when there are other refugee type to be there, and her mother's sending her off. She's going to go alone to the United States the night before. And it's a poem that is not sentimental. Also, she uses chant-like things. She has in it photos she's taken. And documents. It's like a document, multicultural, and a little bit of prose. It's quite a powerful book, Exiles of Eden. I like the S part because it isn't just her. She has a few poems that have religious reference that are very tough because she turns them to her own life. Enough of that, but I wanted
Thank you.
Now let's move on to this poem that's for everybody. And these are all poets worth reading. And I don't think you would know them all. Danusha Lameris is absolutely for everyone. She's getting very big. And some find her a little easy because she's so good. But if you'd like a life-affirming person, I recommend her a lot. This book is called Bonfire Opera, which I loved instantly. A title that combines performance, art, artifice with bonfire. Bonfire Opera. That, to me, that's as good a tag for where we are now in my lifetime looking at our culture. I get sick like everybody else, but I've also learned to look at it like a show, a dangerous show since I was young. What is happening? And Bonfire Opera, pretty much, I would accept as what's going on right now. So I recommend her to you.
Thank you.
Now, Sally Ventura, why did I like this so much before you do any reading? A proctor at the final exam. Since I'm throwing out names, not to diminish this poem, this is you and it. But there's a woman who turns out to write better about teaching. She tends to write about teaching college students than I would have ever thought you could do. Her name is Wendy Barker, B-A-R-K-E-R. She was a poet I knew long ago, and she was always a good, intelligent poet, a woman I admired, I don't know her well, for being a good, intelligent poet. But she suddenly started writing. She did a book about teaching different poets in her class, and the poems are so much better than I would ever imagine somebody would do. They're not asking for the world, but they're real. And they have her point of view as well as dealing with the reality. And she's gotten some awards now. She's really quite a poet you might enjoy looking at because she's also quiet as you are. She's not looking for symbolic flamboyance or verbal brilliance. She's looking for a certain angle of truth, which I admire this for doing. I've been there, everybody's been there, has been an adjunct or a teacher, and you took this on, and I think you made it absolutely real. So we'll talk about it in a minute. I do have some comments. So if we have time, unless Frank tells me I've used up all the available time, read the poem to us, would you? It's one of the longer ones we've heard read, but it's not long. It's about the length of my terminal poem, a page and a little bit of another page. Can we have her read it?
Yes.
Go ahead. I want to be fair about time too.
A proctor at the state exam or final exam. I like
final. I like final exam, yeah.
You like final, okay.
The state exams suggest the teachers taking an exam where they mostly all fail.
Oh, yeah.
This final exam suggests students from a program of some kind.
Oh my God.
A proctor at the final exam, I noticed the fidgeters, the pen suckers, necklace twirlers, earlobe kneaders, knuckle squeezers, thigh bouncers, cuticle chewers, and lip pullers, trying to muster the requisite concentration for the poetry passage. One makes her pen dance like the tail of a happy puppy while she gazes down the aisle, as though in the carpet stains will appear simile defined. Another wrinkles his nose like a suspicious bunny. They wait for me to release them from their tics by calling time. I watch the clock, recalling years ago my mother's frown during mass as I played with my coat zipper. Why can't you stop fiddling? She sighed. But I'm not, I replied. This is a trombone. My mother, who tapped her foot when the nurse adjusted the IV, rolled rosary beads between her fingers as the priest prayed, fluttered her eyelids when I bent to kiss her. I'm thinking of her still as the bank clerk, waiting for the screen to change, drums her red shellacked fingernails along the keyboard. And later, as the old man walks up and down the street at night, even though it has been months since his dog was lost. The next day, when the graders gather, they shuffle their papers, counting how many are left to read. A woman draws her shoulder to her ear as if to muffle the effects of poor diction. Another massages her forehead. A man rubs his brush cut, impatient for better luck. And in the back of the room, tallying scores, sits a tired teacher, nodding.
Well, I adore this poem. I read it 3 times, but hearing it again, looking at it again, I adore it. It really, it's a matter of texture, voice and texture. You don't ask for anything. You don't ask for any response. You know, it's a funny thing about poems. You know, we have an emotion or we want to get an emotion. And it's pretty hard to do it without earning it, even if somebody's on your side initially. That's what I liked about the other poem that was about a public event. And you just call it a proctor at the final exam. Situation, person, and then you repeat the line. And what I like about it is the texture it develops with its little breaks, stanzas. So the texture is the same from start to end without being boring or monotone. And it does a number of magical things, really. First of all, it starts, I notice the fidgeters. So you're calling them fidgeters, that's a certain way to see them. And then you do a nice little catalog. Pen suckers, necklace twirlers, these are very specific and rather delightful. You know, I mean, they're real. That's what's in the room. Cuticle chewers, trying to muster the requisite concentration. Pow, I love that because within the context of the same thought and sentence, you have the little dash and you introduce very gently, this is still the point of view of the observer of them. You don't get lost in this stuff. You're there looking at it and you know what's going on that they're not showing. And then you do requisite concentration. It's one of those moments, like somebody liked my moment in the one poem where you could think about things, that word is longer. And this is requisite concentration is not the same time frame of the unfolding scene in front of you, but it is from your point of view, because you said you're watching them. And it isn't the same language. It isn't a closely observed little physical thing. It's a label, but it's a label that works from within the scene. And it stops us a little bit, makes the mind work a little. Nobody has to be conscious of this, but you move from knuckle squeezers to the requisite concentration. That elongates time. It does something. I'm just calling attention to these, not because there's rules. Whatever works is the only rule in art. And what works is what works for somebody. But the thing is, if you are aware of these as you go over your drafts, they can help you find your way to a shape that you'd like to be there. Then we have that whole first beautiful thing ends, concentration for the poetry passage, or reading poetry. I'm not sure you even need for the poetry passage, by the way, but it's real. You're sticking to reality. It equally could work with requisite concentration. I'm not sure we have to know what it is, unless there might be a particular poem that they're reading that you might want to even put the name in, which could be another delightful element. So I just might stop with requisite concentration. It goes right to one makes her pen dance. These are, again, you managed to pull off a whole little series of delightful, real things. These are a little more transformational, a little more metaphoric. Similes, her pen danced like the tail of a happy puppy while she gazes down the aisle as though in the carpet stains will appear. Simile defined. That's a fabulous, the moments where you introduce the knowing voice of the proctor writing, who knows more than these students, but isn't demeaning them. The little moments where you introduce that are wonderful. They add up, that other subcurrent of you there. Not everybody would have done that in this scene, and you do it delightfully. And then it's getting a little cute. Another wrinkles his nose like a suspicious bunny. I didn't mind that because I thought, well, she's kind of seeing them as childlike, or transforming this slightly onerous burden into something playful. But then you really won me by going to wait for me to release them from their tics, which is perfect. You're naming all of that. You're not just being cute. You found a way to transform their tics that both names them as being a little more childish than you and transforms them into something you can take a little pleasure in while you're doing this. So that tics matters. I'm going on and on because I'm pointing out things that made this work so well. Then we have, I watch the clock. Now we're back to you and your internal voice. Recalling years ago my mother's frown during Mass as I played with my coat zipper. Now one more amazing mini portrait of a fabulous mother comes in, just like we just saw another one. Why can't you stop fiddling, she sighed. But I'm not, I replied. This is a trombone. I mean, your mother was the keep you orderly. I don't know how many generations of women suffered from mothers who passed on the need to keep them ladylike on some level, but I tend to think I'm old enough to have been born into the last Victorian age, but I guess it lingered. My mother was truly a Victorian woman, though she wasn't born back then. And my sisters suffered the consequences. Okay, now, my mother, I like how this is not easy stuff to do. It must come naturally too, but I don't care how many drafts you might or might not have done. The parentheses there, these are things that can stop a poem. You used dashes earlier, and here you use the parentheses, but you have so naturally introduced these couple of levels. I'm here in this room watching this. I'm having my own thoughts. And now you're also going to go to other times. Now you're thinking of your mother when you look at the clock. And then you're going to go beyond that into the time of afterwards. So it works really lovely. And then we go down, my mother who tapped her foot when the nurse adjusted the IV, rolled rosary beads between her fingers as the priest played, fluttered her eyelids when I bent to kiss her. Now the poem could end right there, by the way. Then it would be a little more about your mother, a little more weighted to remembering your mother. And you go on with the larger situation, much as Akua actually pulled off, going on beyond it. I'm thinking of her still as the bank clerk. First time I read it, I thought she was a bank clerk.
Oh.
Waiting, I'm thinking of her still, I kept hearing it still as a bank clerk.
Right.
Thinking of her as the bank clerk waits for the screen to change. There might be something. I'm hypersensitive, but I think it pays off to me to little moments of stoppage, diversion, controlling things. And I think that the still is a word that just might imperceptibly throw someone for an instant as he or she processes the unfolding poem. And it's so fine as a tapestry because it keeps driving on. It doesn't paint a still picture. It keeps driving on. So I think thinking of her as the bank clerk waits for the screen to change, or that gets you a break in time. I realize that. There's a space there. And you've already moved us away from the scene you're in with the, as I bent to kiss her. That was in the past. So then you might just take the I am thinking and start the next stanza with that. So there's no confusion about time. I mean, it gives us a little more of a break. I am thinking of her as the bank clerk, or I'm still thinking of her, if you want, as the bank clerk waits for the screen to change. We know you're in a different scene, in a different place and time. You get what I'm saying? Just take that I am thinking, which ties them together, and just benefit from the space to move us on further in time. And later, as the old man walks up and down the street at night, even though it has been months since his dog was lost. That's so compassionate and empathetic without being sentimental. I'm wondering, this is the one poem of many that I'm wondering if you don't benefit from taking the enjambment the next day, because then you have a break anyhow, and start the next unit with the next day when the graders gather, because there are these time breaks in the story you're telling us. And you're having a little difficulty working them in quite. So just use the little space. You already have it there. See that? Think about that. And then we'll have the next day. I love how this moves us on in time. Was so immediately in the room. And it was so transformational, but so precisely observant. And then you move to your own memory of your mother, the clock. And now then we have the next day when the graders gather. And that's a natural break. There's an aftermath. We all gather. And I'll be darned, this delightful woman I never knew before, this delightful poet, is every bit as observant of real small things from first to last throughout this whole poem, which gives it a unique texture that makes it what it is. And why Rubin isn't telling you, cut this, cut that, it's because of the texture you create. A woman, you could also end this poem, a good poem like this has several possible endings. I'm the guy who might go back to a shorter version because that's my instinct. But it could have ended with, since his dog was lost, or it could have ended with counting how many are left to read. That's a kind of ending. It's only for you to figure out what the weight of energy and meaning is for any of these endings. What would that one get you? Well, that would get you the burdensomeness of it, and the communal aspect of us, the teachers, the graders, goes beyond this moment I portray. But you go further and you do the same close observation you did in the classroom, in the test room. A woman draws her shoulder to her ear as if to muffle the effects of poor diction. Another massages her forehead. A man rubs his brush coat, impatient for better luck. And in the back, I guess by that he means better luck, to have better stuff to read, I imagine. That's a wonderful way to put it. And in the back of the room, tallying scores. What a wonderful final idea. Somebody's summing it all up. Sits a tired teacher, nodding, nodding. You found a great way to end that. I would have said it keeps going on past many ways it could have been effective, but you found a way to also really end it, nodding, nodding. A single gesture in the instant, repeated. The poem has moved on gracefully and delightfully in time. And what it tells me is, you may not have thought this, but I think your imagination was, that's what matters. There's a generosity here that's amazing to me. You look at those students with their tics, you observe the tics, you made them a little bit infantilized, but you didn't diminish them. You were enjoying it. And now when you're with the graders, you're observing as closely their tics. And what that did for me anyhow, was an unexpected justification of the poem. You actually, your imagination wedded these hapless, hopeless, typical students trying to make things work, maybe they're great or not, with the teachers and judges later. They're doing similar things, they're doing the same things, and I know you know that. It's a generous imagination. It expanded the humanity of this whole thing. And I really think, the way I just discussed it, it's a damn strong poem, and I think it is. I think it's a poem that, like Wendy, could get published somewhere. You always have to find the right reader or place. I like some of the poems I read before a lot, maybe more than some people who heard them for the first time. But I can tell you the one that went over best, the avoiding history, really, evading Hitler, was rejected several times before somebody loved it and took it. And that's the nature of that game. So you have to believe in your poem. And I think this is a publishable poem, but we require somebody not to dismiss it on topic, not to go beyond, and to really let it speak inside. And that's always luck of the draw.
Okay.
But you did your job beautifully here. It's a kind of narrative that pays very remarkable attention without asking for too much sympathy or being too cosmic or being too cruel, all of which are possible.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. In talking about it, I love it even more. So, let me go on to something else. What else? I believe in I'm not telling anybody how to write, but I do believe.
A problem in a sense. Got a problem.
Time, Frank is frozen. What the hell happened? Are the gods stopping me? Rubin's going on too much. Can anybody out there hear me? I can move on to another poem without Frank. Good. Waiting for the Butterfly. Do I have another one? That's the next one I really have here, isn't it? I have Waiting for the Butterfly by Diane. Diane, you got yours up, didn't you? I thought you did it early as cut and paste.
Let me see if I can do that again.
I don't know if I missed another poem by our last poet, but I like what I did with that one. It's very, very strong. So at the very least, I showed her own strength. And that's something you need to work with. We all need to go beyond what we are and try other things, but you really have to get to know your basic strengths as you go. And trust them. Go ahead. Now, are you freezing up, Diane? Oh, crap.
No, I think it might be coming. I have to see. There it is.
There you go. I don't know if other people have been thrown into whole screen mode and have to escape it to see your poem on the side again. I have your poem in my own folder that my own file we couldn't paste today, but I've got it. I'm going to read it from that. Okay, are you in California or where are you?
I'm in California. Yes, I was born and raised in Rochester, but I moved to California in the 90s.
Garbage plates. Do you remember garbage plates?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay, you have two poems there, and I very much want to start with Waiting for the Butterfly, which is a lovely little poem. So,
do you want me to read it?
Let's see, it's not that long. Do we have time? Let me look at my watch. Well, I mean, I don't know how you guys stay on afterwards. I would like this one read if you could read it.
Okay, I can do that if it's okay.
Not the other one, this one. Yeah, read this.
Waiting for the Butterfly. I creep into the butterfly habitat, dappled with perfume, wearing my most colorful, flowerful blouse, ready for filigree butterflies to cover me. I stand as a park statue, silent as the pious in prayer. Occasionally I drift toward a new feathery squall, offer myself, passive altar, a turned down bed. Amazed, I see whirls of wings flicker and flutter past me to settle instead upon silver-haired shrieking tourists, corpulent cameraman in a sweat-logged suit, chocolate-smeared children waving their arms calling, "Come here, butterfly, come over here." I watch amidst chatter and clutter, silent, scented, open-palmed, still waiting.
Well, I get to say it's a lovely poem. I liked it the first time I read it. I like it more. I do have something to say by way of just commentary on it. And it's very small stuff. And it starts with how you set this up. This is entirely subjective. I initially didn't love the word creep because it suggests more furtiveness. I know you're trying to do it without disturbing them, and it's a strong word. And so therefore I will own it as a subjective connection. And I was thinking, is there a sharper way to just get your entry into it? Then when you said butterfly habitat, that's fine, because I recently think you're at a zoo or someplace that has a special area for butterflies. We know special room or building for butterflies. And And I don't even know that creep matters. I get what you're doing is not trying to disturb them, but I enter, or is there another way you could say that? I don't know. It's not a big deal. I love the verbal energy of dappled. I love the sound of it. With perfume, wearing my most colorful, flowerful blouse, you're like a butterfly, ready for butterflies to cover me. I like how simply you say these things. Then you give me the break. I stand still as a park statue. Good simile. Silent as the pious in prayer. That actually works because you are doing a kind of ritual here, obviously. Occasionally I drift toward a new feathery squall. I offer myself, passive altar, a turned down bed. That's great. That's great stuff. Short lines, offer myself. That's the, and then altar, turned down bed. That's how comfortable and intimate you want to be with the butterflies. And now, first reading, I didn't like amazed because I would say you don't have to name it. Tell us what where you are. Why give me your mental state? It does work in this poem though, because you have amazement and disappointment. I might suggest trying to write it with clipping a little of that out to see what happens. If you go, I see whirls of wings flicker and flutter past me. We know you're trying to attract them. Settle instead. I mean, it's possible to think of this poem without amazed and without instead, just as you're observing it. And the way you might handle that, I'm not sure you should do this, but the way you might handle that would be to occasionally I drift toward a new feathery squall, lovely description. And instead of occasionally, which is nice, it shows you're standing, you probably need it, but it shows that you're standing there like a statue, but you don't stay as a statue. You might have, I drift toward each new feathery squall. So you could have two lines out of it. I drift toward each new feathery squall because nothing's happening. I'm just trying to play with the movement of the poem and its energy. What you have works well. I'm playing with whether occasionally I'm amazed and instead are judgmental sort of words. I don't mean judgmental in a heavy way. I just mean words that pull us a little bit away from the physicality of the scene, but I'm not sure they don't make the poem work. That's what the poem is really about. So I just offer that to you as a thought. Whirls of wings flicker and flutter past me is great. I guess some of this has to do with whether you want us to, how aware you want us to be of this person's, it seems like you've done this before and are used to them doing it. You're expecting it. So that's why you have amazed and all that. And you know, that's probably what you want. There might be another way of doing it. And settling instead upon, I think the amazed and instead is really what the poem is about. I expect them to settle all over me like always. Might be another way to get that thought in as you enter. I enter as usual. I enter quietly as usual. Just because you expect something and it doesn't happen, but I'm just playing with it. Corpulent cameraman, slightly angry at him. Chocolate smeared children waving their arms. I can see these things calling, come here, butterfly, come over here. An ironic thing about this is you're echoing in a wholly different poem her mother of the other poem across the street. Come here, come over here, but it's totally different. I watch. You're back to being a statue again because you're not going to get them. Not now, not this one. Amidst chatter and clutter, silent, scented, open palmed, still waiting. I really like that last gesture. Could end with come here, come over here, but it wouldn't be the same poem. The poem is, I'm still standing again like a statue. My palms are out. It's almost a ritual. It's almost religious. It's a sacrament. My palms are out, still waiting. And maybe the good thing is maybe they will come to you. Maybe they will see the error of their way. Maybe they will come to you. I think there is a good humor about it that makes disappointment and judgment acceptable. But you see what I'm doing? I'm making a subtle suggestion, some other right word about how you
thank you. I appreciate that.
To the first line, which is fine. But now that you've done the whole poem and it's not just setting it up, maybe there's a way to even do the introduction to the habitat that's a little stronger. I don't know if even capitalizing butterfly habitats are big clear that it's, but I don't think that's what you want. All right, that's enough of that, but I love that. I love that poem. It was like the last one. It did something not easy to do, and it did it without asking for much, with a kind of humility. about it. I'm still waiting. I would like them to come to me. I'm not the queen of butterflies. They won't bring me to transcendence, but I'm waiting for them. You're not even really demeaning the others. You're making a little satire of. They had the butterflies come to them. And you're still waiting for what you would like to have happen. Is there another poem by you in this? Yes. Neatly done. I put 3 pluses on it, which is my own little sign to myself. And your
Thank
other
you.
poem, is the applications poem, which is a less wonderful because it's trying for something different. It's kind of
Yes.
a satiric, ironic poem of a kind I enjoy writing. Many of us write. There's good ones written that are kind of at an angle of opposition to the very thing you have to participate in, and implicitly being ironic about it. It's a good way to go, irony, instead of just judgmental. You know, you're being
Okay.
ironic and you're naming the names in a way. But I like the particularity of the opening, which doesn't give away anything. I darken light circles in a personality inventory. Okay, we know what it's like to fill out those things, decoding desired characteristics of the ideal job candidate. I almost would get rid of desired characters. Oh, works fine, it's what it is. But I'm thinking of, you're actually decoding the ideal job candidate. But all right, let go. I tone down the possession of imagination. You're doing like the anti-thing. It's a wonderful kind of ironic, satiric thing. Pledge allegiance to authority. Polish policy and procedures to a high gloss. Like you're really telling us, I'm lying my ass off. I went this
Yes,
job
basically.
in a less gentle way, because it's a different poem than the Proctor poem. You're talking about something you have to do, and she was extremely humane and generous about participating in it. And you're not as generous about this form. You're deconstructing it, you're opposing it in the poem while you have to play with it. And denounce Satan in the form of poetry and declare a chain of command for the universe. I like that. You're really taking it to the highest level here. Stating the world holds no mystery for me. You're really reclaiming your poet identity in a defiant way without being romantic about it. I'm too fine for this stuff. You're just answering it. And you're answering it like a poet by being verbal. I abandon philosophy in the graves of the erudite dead. These are strong, smart things to say. Somebody else could say, I abandon philosophy in the graves of the erudite dead. You're giving homage to that whole line of thinkers some of us know about and descend from, the line of poets that we realize most of the world doesn't honor.
Yes.
When you're dealing with philosophy, you're dealing with a smaller world than the poet's world, who never endured background checks. I like how you stick to your irony, your weapon, or agreed to round-the-clock duty. The ultimate prize you're going to win, this job, deserves some satire too. Miles from where they would sleep. Frankly, I absolutely believe your inevitable last little stanza and the nice personal involvement, the closest inspecting eyes my own. That's all wonderful, good, smart, not wordy. Poem's too good for it. You shuck it because what's there is so good. You don't need, it becomes unnecessary. It wasn't unnecessary, becomes unnecessary. This judgment, you don't have to tell me anyway that your close inspection of your eyes were at work all the time and that you had to agree to things you don't inwardly agree to. You already just did that so well. So I really think it needs to end with miles from where they would sleep. That both delicately echoes Robert Frost, intentionally or not, miles to go before I sleep. And it says everything. You're saying those philosophers, the erudite who never endured background checks or agreed to the clock duty, miles from where they would sleep. The ultimate truth is this job I'm trying to get isn't even,
sucks.
Yeah, and it's not even, forget whether it even pays well or is terrible. I have to go through this to get a job that is miles from where I'm even would like to be, where I'm going to get my rent. So I think it's a terrific little poem without that last stanza. The end.
Okay, thank you.
Look, I'm pleased at these poems as I'm doing them. Let's go to another one. We have to get everybody. We're running out of time, but I think we can stay a bit for those who really want to hear their poem discussed. And I hope the rest of you will stay to see their poems. There's not that many of you left. Frank, can you put up, or somebody put up, I'm not going to do
Disconnected earlier. The problem I'm having here, unlike what I was thinking, is that I would be able to just copy and paste people's poems because I was not using Microsoft Word.
Too
But
complicated.
for instance, I don't know who hasn't been up yet.
Oh, yeah. I've got in front of me, I want to do, Marty's going, so I guess that's a break a teacher gets. I don't have to deal with him here, but it was good stuff to deal with. I would very much like to do, let's see, there's one person. Oh, well, actually, am I just down to two? No, there's, yeah, you're right. We actually managed to do it. Believe me, wordy as I seemed, taking you through it, or I was. If we'd had it working like yesterday, it would have all been much more efficient. Now, what I do want to do then is look at the poem that has a Russian title.
Oh, yeah.
I happen to have been a Russian minor who chose English graduate school over Russian studies. So I could read it, Ruski.
Let me see if I can copy that in. Hopefully work. I don't know. It seems to be a matter of length. Chat will only accept so many lines.
Well, I really want to pay attention to the earlier part of it. So, although it's a strong, it's very interesting.
Okay, okay, there we go. We got the poem.
It is about as interesting in a way, maybe the most interesting poem, because it's very unpredictable in subject matter and what it says. And it starts with the Cyrillic alphabet. The good old Russians never even had an alphabet, as you may know. A Greek Orthodox monk had to bring them the Greek alphabet so they could have an Russians are such a mix of things, so many different things. And one of them is that fundamental primitive thing that's still in their soul, particularly the ones who don't look to Europe. And this is Russian meaning Russian. That's all. It's like an adjective. It's like saying American or Mexican, Ruski. But it also is an adjective for the Russian language. Pa-Ruski, do it in Russian. Ruski Yazika or Ruski Yazika, I forget whether it's feminine or not, the Russian language. And that's what it is. And I love it for putting it there in Russian, that somebody might recognize as Russian, but wouldn't even know what it's saying necessarily. Your savageness, of course, you could, if you did a book or collection, you could have a little list somewhere or something to say what the translation is. If you wanted to put the titles of the language, she wrote something for each language at some point that she was studying or translating. So you could do it this way. It'd be an interesting thing for a collection if maybe you need a little footnote at the bottom just saying, I don't know, or listen, your savageness is the only match. As somebody who studied Russian history a bit and Russian language and literature, it's a great word to use for it. It's a history, the literature is a history of trying to be civilized against savagery. And I don't mean savagery to judge Russians as people. I mean an element in the wildness of the country, the eastern part of the country, the Siberia, the way, the whole story of it. Your savageness is the only match. That's an extremely interesting first line. How could you not want to read to the next line? For a winter that makes a wolf eat a wolf. I'm not the expert on Russia or literature, but I know more than an average person. And I have to say, that's a gorgeous essence of Russia on one level and of Russian literature on one level, what the writers had to deal with. A winter that makes a wolf eat a wolf. That could apply to some other parts of the world, but maybe nowhere better than Siberia, for instance. Yet you think my heart is a dark forest. I adore this thing. It's going inside. It's going into emotion and feeling and defiance a little bit. Yet you think, and it doesn't give away any particular emotion. You're the one who gave it to me. This is about as amazing to me as any 4 lines I've read in a long time. I mean, they are amazing lines. How could you not want to read more? But it also gives her the problem in the shifting tone. It works. For me, it works. It does so many different things. It evokes so many different things, but it works together in one sentence. How could you not want to read more? But this is a prime example in this whole set of how something that I would frankly call amazing poses a problem for the poem. It got such amazing compressed verbal energies with so many strands of potential meaning and feeling into them. What is the rest of the poem going to do? And I'm not saying this meaning as a poet, you have to have a program. I'm saying that as somebody facing a draft, you have to say, hey, this draft is pretty damn strong. I thought I was going to have to do 20 more drafts to get anything out of this, to get a sculpture taking shape, because I'm too smart to beat it into any meaning I want it to have. You have to hear the energies it has and see how you might follow it. So what is she going to do? And I couldn't tell her. I do know one possible suggestion is, and it's for any of us looking at our drafts, detach that wonderful first four as a first stanza. Maybe to try, put a number on it, 1, maybe do that. This is a unit. Then the next unit is going to take it somewhere. Now, the way this first unit ended, it suggests the possibility, I don't know if it should, that it's going to go into some particular relationship, some personal relationship. Whether it was particularly important or not, it's somebody. You're the one who gave it me. Now, I think she means Russia, reading Russia, getting empathetic about Russia. But I think it's very interesting. It says, you're the one who gave it to me. Those are very personal terms. So I think if it's about Russia, it might end there. If it wants to go further, it does a very small, strong, terrifically unpredictable inventory of Russian literature, really. But it looks like it's more personal than that. Before you introduced yourself with a tale of the chicken-footed hut. That sounds like a Russian folktale, I don't know, but you guys may not know. That Russian folktales, or what?
Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga, that's right. Russian folktales are probably literally the richest in all the folktale literature. Everybody's are. But when they first studied folktales scientifically, they used Russian folktales, the morphology of the Russian folktale. It's like they were basically millions of illiterate people living fairly primitive lives and having these great folktales. I'm not saying Russia doesn't have a great, great, great culture, certainly. And their folktales are especially powerful. So are the German ones. Nobody's allowed to read to their children anymore. The Scandinavian ones that could be bloody. Everybody's native folktale. So you'd have me spare the world my cleverness. This is such wonderful stuff that it all suggests novels and short stories. I mean, it suggests some amazing relationship that the speaker here is beyond, is in a way judging and framing. You'd have me spare the world my cleverness. That's an amazing statement, reminding me that cleverer ones than I are in jail. That sounds like a punitive mother, a punitive Russian morality, a punitive something. It does make me wonder how it's directed. And then the short line, you say love is evil. These are like dynamite going off, each of these. And they do raise questions. I'm not saying you have to turn it into a soap opera. And a man may be good, but it's best to shoot him. This is a certain kind of morality. Hang him if he's German. This is both one take on Russia at a certain point, and it's also a take on a certain kind of person or Russian, or maybe a mother who's Russian. I mean, you don't really know, and you don't need to know, but these questions are enticingly raised as you go. And the question for the poet is, what do I do to keep the energy going so it's fulfilling me in some way? I don't know that breaking into stanzas is necessary, but I do think the energy of the first 4 lines, and maybe including the 5th, might do well in their separate space or not. Can't say. Now we have, no word is necessary for you to announce your existence. That moves the rhetoric to another plane. I'm not dismissing it, but I'm wondering if the poem didn't end with hang him if he's German. Because you're getting an attitude. You're not saying everybody should be hung if they're German. You're capturing something about a Russian, a person you had a relationship with, or just your reading of Russian folktales, Russian literature, history. You're just capturing something particular that might end with hang him if he's German. That's almost funny. It's dark. It's part of a portrait of someone, something, some culture, some moment in it. Then we get to no word is necessary to announce your existence. That's kind of flat. You could do it though, rhetorically, it's another movement. So therefore, if you broke this into stanzas, that would start another whole stanza, another movement of the thing. But it doesn't really tie tightly to the verse we've had. So I like it being separate there. Probably requires 3 stanzas for the whole poem or something. You know nothing is in your possession, merely in your vicinity. That's a fabulous line again. It's almost as if the poet has chosen to speak in her own version of folktale epigrams, folktale wisdom. And therefore, no word is necessary for you to announce your existence. I just take that out. It still builds to another level. You know nothing is in your possession. I think that's true of German, of Russian, so many, it's true everywhere of this phase, but Russia remains serfs much longer than most other Western countries, if it ever was Western. That's one of its great questions always. And they were primitive serfs owned by landowners. They lived a serf's life, and that existed longer than many other places. Yes, we had slavery, we didn't invent it, but we also had, and we had poor people, all that, but Russia, the serfdom of Russia went on for a very long time. It resulted in the revolution. So I like that she says that. And it's also universally true for people who aren't the owners anywhere. Nothing is in your possession, only in your vicinity. It reminds me, as somebody who's read Russian literature, of so many stories, however, that take place out in the estates, out in the country, not Petersburg, where all the real civil people were. And I love that. That's a 1-sentence epigraph for everybody alive today, including some of the people rioting in cities, whatever, some of them, not even to excuse them. It speaks for the people who aren't the owners, which is endlessly at the heart of politics, if you live in anything like a democracy, where the leader doesn't get to declare it for everybody till they revolt. So you have, you know nothing is in your possession, merely in your vicinity, unless you're actually rendering a Russian folk wisdom. I don't remember, I only can remember a couple of them, like eat bread and salt and grow wise, which tells you a lot about Russia. You're giving a brilliant version of what a Russian folk wisdom epigraph might be. Nothing is in your possession, merely in your vicinity, but you know that, which makes you what you are, that you know that. It's like sort of pre-revolution. Even a name is something done to you. Aren't these, if anybody's still listening to me going on, aren't these actually brilliant ways to name the condition of the powerless, pretty much anywhere? And even Germans who had some of this, because they had so many Turks come in way before the waves of refugees from the wars in Syria. They had so many Turks come in. It was only like 10 years ago or so that they changed their law to make it legal to name a child something other than one of the approved German names. So that speaks to all of us, even Western democracies. They had so many Turks becoming citizens instead of just migrant workers way before the recent waves that they had to accommodate reality. You can name your son Mohammed instead of Fritz, you know, and those things have reasons to have existed. You can always call them racist, but they also were the people's identity, you know. Even a name is something done to you. I think that's true, and it's true of my origin. If I go back to how I got my name, Rubin is a good Ellis Island name for some people coming through. It was Rodomiselski. You know, this is true. You know you're not among the powerful when you're not a namer. I love these. I'm going on and on lecturing on them, but it's just because each of these strokes is kind of brilliant. We'll take out the one line I thought was too much, but how to make the organization work. Maybe this is all it needs because it does keep moving on. Then we might have another stanza break, because even a name is something done to you deserves a little space of its own. It culminates a little movement. Then we might have you whisper to the drowned child carried through the streets. I don't know how I can justify that little bit of seeming grammatical erring, but it's kind of making it present tense in that it's still this person you're addressing, this being, this no word is necessary for you. I took that out, but hang him if he's German is very present. You know nothing is in your possession is present. A name is done to you. So I have you whisper to the drowned child carried through the streets. Made the concentration camps resound with laughter. And the pleasures you give resonate deeper than any others, for they were never expected. Again, I tip my hat to you because like two of the other poets, you went beyond where this should have ended, my God. You have concentration camps resound with laughter. You say, no, no, take that out. Even the name is something done to you. Why bring in the particularity of the concentration camps? But I think it's a reach you go to and works. I mean, it's entirely, it could be a different poem, but you reach for that. And to justify that would shock most people. I have no idea what this poet knows about these things, really. It would shock most people. But I can tell you this. I taught Holocaust once with a partner. I didn't want to teach it, Holocaust Lit. And then I went to it as another year we did it. And the guests who came in, and I'd heard guests, I'd seen guests. I taught it one year, we had guests. There were more survivors then. The guests included a survivor or two, I forget if it was one or two, whose topic was jokes we told in Auschwitz. Got that?
Yeah.
That's how you survive anything. Only the most we're now in a wave, I won't go on about, of, to me, repugnant American Puritanism. It comes and goes in different ways, and we've got it going. Everything's totally right or wrong. You can't say this. That offends me. Well, everybody's always offended by something, but I have to tell you, I personally heard somebody recount jokes they told in Auschwitz, and I think it helped them keep living. And nobody thinks it means, if only all the dead could have told more jokes. That's not what it means. It means part of how the human being is, if you're a human capable of that. And they told each other jokes. And then she makes that real by saying, the pleasures you give resonate. I'm not sure the pleasures you give, which sort of goes back to the larger Russia or the larger relationship or whatever, literature. You're now talking a little more particularly how some people from Russia, and there were more likely Jews, but not only Jews in the concentration camp, resound with laughter. I just think that was never expected. I mean, there was a way to perhaps get to that. You made that concentration camp resound with laughter, which might be asking for a little much. Everybody wasn't laughing, but you made it, justified it a bit by the pleasures were deeper than others, for they were never expected. Maybe you could combine it with the idea of the laughter, because there's a little bit of a reach to say Auschwitz is resounding with laughter. But you might have made the concentration camps resound, something to pull those together in a sharper phrase that has to do with a laughter deep and never expected, or a laughter with a pleasure deeper than deep pleasure because it was never, I don't know. You did something very graceful there to justify that whole perhaps off-putting reference to laughter. I like it. And the way you ended it justifies it. I'm just playing around and sharing my playing with you as a writer, with whether you could somehow compress that into a phrase that pulls it sharply together. But I think it's really a remarkable poem, and I must ask the poet, and you do not have to have any answer or give one you have, but what in the world is the pretext for this poem? And it doesn't mean you have to have one, but I will claim this as a generality. Somewhere in a poem that's working, it somehow makes you feel like the reason for writing it was somehow incorporated in it, even if it was never named. And you seem to have hinted about that several times when you go beyond expectations. So do you want to say anything about how you wrote this, or what you think it's doing now, or why it's there? Tell us.
I had heard the saying that when you learn a language, you gain a soul. And when I studied a language spoken by my ancestors, looked at their proverbs, their literature, aspects of their language, I realized this has helped shape me into what I am, among other things.
You know what? That's plenty of it. That's plenty. And you actually equaled that reason. You had a little bit of it in advance because you were doing a little project writing about language. This one you personally connected to. So you had a personal reason, and you did a brilliant job of equaling the notion of proverbs from a culture with your own. Are any of these really Russian proverbs you were told or taught by anyone you descend from? Or is it just your answer? Really cool. I love this more than I expected. I love the opening, which is smashing, but I love what went on beyond it. Better than I expected. You actually set your mark and equaled it. I can say, when you say concentration camps resound with laughter, I think we can rely on the fact, but you really can't ever, that a reader will get that that's partly imaginative. We get that they were basically death factories, not resounding with laughter, but
I know though, I knew when I wrote that a lot of readers would find that very jarring, and the explanation is a little more mundane. My Russian-speaking grandfather was an interpreter in concentration camps during World War II after the...
Holy crow.
And people were laughing at his version of Russian that he was speaking.
I got it. I come from Russians who didn't go to this, but I do get that that is a very particular moment in general in the poem. When you say that, you don't for a minute mean everybody was laughing ever. You're meaning this happened. I mean, you told me about your, and I don't want you to build the interpreter, but it gets too many levels. What I like about this is you stuck to the level of the poem, which is remarkable.
I was just wondering, Stan, if it's just the word resound that seems too strong, whereas resonate in the present tense brings it all back home, so to speak, that because we were able to, those who did, made it through resound or not resound, whatever word you're going to use there. It has that nice, beautiful thing where you come into the present, resonating deeper than any others.
I do like the word, see, that's the problem word, but often do we not learn that the word that sticks, this is what's wrong with writing groups generally, if you actually believe them. They'll stick on something, they have to say something, they'll say that's a bad word. But the word that somebody really sticks on is often the most interesting thing in a whole poem. And this is the interesting thing because we know it isn't literally true, and you even have a background that makes it even more literally true. People laughed, you got them laughing, and they laughed there. And at that moment, it was as if they were filling the whole damn horror of the whole of World War II and with laughter, human being. And so I don't know a graceful way without saying too much and being awkward to say that. So right now I would stick with resound. When you said that's the word, you're of course right, that's the word to go to. I mean, that's the word that makes it, you know, like the Holocaust movie that was such a risk and won the Oscar? The Italian movie where the guy is making the whole of
yeah, oh gosh. Yeah, what's the name?
It's a beautiful,
it's a wonderful
something.
Life is beautiful. Life
is beautiful.
And I think you did the same thing here because you're making folktale sayings add up to something immensely big in what it can't really encompass, but it gives this take to it because you're dealing with the folktale nature. Take that one line where no word is necessary, where you're kind of commenting on the poem a little too much. The poem's working. And it's just wonderful. I tend to think resound is the great moment. You could never give this to any writing group, especially today in our puritanical era. People wouldn't dump all over you for that, some of them. But one whose ear got it, and presumably, although everybody isn't this realistic about life, people in your writing group aren't probably Nazi skinheads. So by denouncing you for this, they really wouldn't be denouncing Nazi skinheads. So, but if somebody who got it, that's a reader to cherish. They got the level of angle of speech here. I cannot say to renew it. I can't total its problem. You're saying it's kind of abolished it all for those people at that moment. I don't really know what else to say. I've talked too much about it. I like this poem more than I thought I liked it originally. It's rather remarkable. How much can you go doing this kind of thing? I don't know. All right, are we done? Did I get cut off talking parts in spite of my sign to myself here?
Oh, we've got, I don't know what you mean. Done with Ricky's poem, or you done?
I'm done with her, but I could do one more poem from the last poet left.
Well, we've got Ariel. I finally did manage to, I hope.
Oh, I have to do Ariel. I have to do
Let's
Ariel.
Let's see if this works.
I can talk to the one whose poems are left. If I don't get them in now, I can do that separately.
I don't think I managed to get the whole poem in, Ariel.
I want Ariel. I'm sorry to have skipped her while I was talking. I didn't skip her, but I kind of.
I got most of it in. I don't know how much is missing. I did manage to find a way to convert the. I did manage to find a way to convert the PDF into a doc file, but once again, there seems to be a character or word in it to the chat. So.
I gave you all this talking like I would do if you were in front of me in an office or sitting one-on-one at a university table. You would
Okay. Oh, I see. Hold on.
So I ended up holding Ariel hostage. We all did, as the one who hung on for no other reason. So her poem would get its moment.
Mike, I tried to paste it into the chat, and I had the same problem. I only got part of the thing.
What?
Can you
I tried to paste it into chat, Stan, but it only got part of it. I don't know why the last stanza doesn't come in, you know?
Can you paste the stanza separately?
I did try that too.
I have it in my file, so I can talk about it. But everybody,
Wait a minute, I'm just curious if I can get that last part up.
wait a minute, what happened to Ariel's poem?
It's not there?
I'm gonna have to go back to one of my original folders.
If you scroll up in the chat, it's the
Stan,
PDF.
you don't have it. It was sent today.
Okay, we'll scroll up in chat.
Where is that?
Craig,
oh, there we go.
You're way at the end.
I think I can get that last part in there, Ariel. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Later, her mother. Okay, wait a sec.
Oh yeah, Ariel Rudolph Harwick. That's a lovely name.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ariel's lovely. How'd they name you that?
Okay, let's see.
If your mother was a Sylvia Plath fan.
Let's see. Did that
Shakespeare?
Did that get it all?
I love that.
Not Disney.
Yeah. Oh God, we've destroyed children by being afraid of giving them anything disturbing.
Is that finish it off, Ariel?
It does. It's a little hard to read on my end, but yeah. If y'all are having problems, just look at the PDF.
Yeah, I've got the PDF. I've got the doc file. So
way to go,
if you want me to upload the doc file for other people to download.
James added comments on there, didn't he?
I'm sorry?
James added his own comments on it.
Me? No.
Oh, okay.
No, those aren't comments. That's the rest of the poem.
Oh, okay, that's right. That's right. I don't remember. All right, let's go back to it. Thank you for putting it in, James, sticking it out. Heartwood, Ariel Rudolph Harwick. I love the reference to Shakespeare, and I like her Sylvia naming her horse for that. It was her escape. This poem, I would like. We may as well, for anybody who's still around, give you your full due. Read the poem.
Okay.
I want to hear how you read it.
Give me 1 second. Heartwood, for my mother. Is there a single beach along a walking path that isn't scrawled with the initials of proud vandals? The unblemished skin just begs to be hurt. Their whims take only a moment and a knife, but the scars endure, all the more grotesque as seasons come and go. Even the broadest tree is furrowed with the names of lovers long divorced or dead. And how we've evolved to pick at the weak spots, to worry the scabs and open the wounds. The woodpecker seeks the brittle clefts, riddled with insects. The bark beetle carves his tracks just beneath the skin.
Yeah.
Walking in the woods, a boy sees a tree scalloped with lichen, and thinking it only another dead, hollow thing, pushes it over just to feel his power. While playing in a field, the boy pins his sister, who is 4. Looking back, his thrusts are puny, stunted, but in the moment he is a monster, a nameless fear. In the late sun, his shadow across the dirt is nearly endless. Later, her mother asks, "Did he hurt you? You can tell me." Even at 4, the sister knows that truth is heavy and cold as a boulder. "No, Mama," she says, "not really." Years later, that field is choked with saplings. When trees grow so closely, most of them will die. One given to fungus and blight, another throttled by a helix of poison ivy, another just hungry for sun. The ones that do live sag over a wire fence, long abandoned, but the barbs are lodged deep in the flesh. And though the heartwood is dead, the sap still flows.
Well, I'm ending with a beautiful problem in a beautiful poem. All I'm going to do is point out. I can't recommend anything on this. It's very, very strong, very well sustained. Given that it seems to build to stuff that could be traumatic or could be deeply embedded in you or somebody's imagination or being, it's amazingly, the word texture I used for the other, it's amazingly consistent in texture and discreet. You're a discreet person and poet. And it is, therefore, I can't see a place where it breaks or you shouldn't have done it. I could see a place, other places where you could end. And the only reason that has any value is if you're not already aware of that when you look back at drafts. And it makes you think about, well, am I going on in a way, maybe I want to go on, but maybe this did so much to here that I don't find a way to start the next part of it, whatever. So it's worth noting that. And I will note, because each of the endings I would suggest is the culmination of one movement of power. And one of these could be right at the first part where I don't know how this looks, by the way, Ariel. This has very eccentric variety of line breaks. Is that how it was? I mean,
No, it's 4 stanzas of equal length. So
good. I like that,
yeah,
because I figured that. I see you as a more discreet poet in that sense. We have all learned, I would hope by now, and you have to always help students find it. You can't teach them anything, they have to learn it, so you can help them find it. That you can play with it in different stanzas and forms, and it changes meanings and makes things irrelevant or suggestive. I mean, that's the beauty. I love it. If you don't thrive on that part, maybe you shouldn't be trying to be a poet, or just be a god from Greece who gets inspired perfectly every time. I like the title. You play both sides of it. You play the wood and the woods and the tree, and you play heart, and you got heart with. It's a great title because of how you use it. And then we go through there, and it starts with a very enticing is the wrong word because it's quieter, but it is enticing, literally. It starts with a question and a voice that isn't asking for much, but it's a real voice, I believe, that's speaking to me as the reader, and that's setting something in motion that is real, imaginatively. Is there a single beach? But already the single beach, the question you ask, is there a single beach that isn't? That's a very significant formulation to keep me more deeply involved in the poem as you go. It's like challenging. Is there a single beach along a walking path that isn't scrawled? Wonderful verb. You're making this realer and realer, the scene with the initials of proud vandals. Now that one is both wonderful and risky. That's why it's wonderful, because that characterizes the speaker a bit. To call it proud vandals. You could see it many other ways, and that sets a certain tone for the poem. The unblemished skin just begs to be heard. That is dynamite. That already early in the poem, which got so much real stuff going, elevates what's at stake. And better yet, it doesn't name what's at stake. It doesn't scream anything. It just, as a statement, wow, elevates what's at stake. And it makes us realize, just without thinking about it, something's at stake here. I'm going to keep reading. Anybody would tell you in a writing group, well, we have to understand this. Of course, they're wrong. I mean, nobody's really wrong in art, but if it's going to be art, well, it'll be justified by what follows. It doesn't have to have been pre-explained. So then you put this element in. The unblemished skin just begs to be heard. Then you turn that to tattoo. It spoke way beyond tattoo. It dealt with trees, with graffiti. It dealt with the trees being scrawled. And now we have this. Now it gets to another dangerous thing, which makes it interesting. They're whims. So just like proud vandals, you're giving me a language. They're whims. You're sort of saying, and what whims is she talking about? Well, probably people scribbling in trees are just doing a whimsical of the moment thing, but now you're making it be tattoo, linking that really to it, all of it. It has to do with scars, see the heavy words and elevated things are at stake, are entering in here like little surreptitious strangers, but they're not under the surface. You haven't ruined them by giving them their full meaning. They're going to have to go somewhere. So you're taking the idea of beech trees on a path scrawled with initials being blemishes that vandals did, and then you're moving it to a statement that unblemished skin begs to be hurt. And then you're going to the scars endure in spite of whims, whatever, whether it's a tree or a person or emotional or tattooing, the scars endure. All the more grotesque, another big judgment word gets in there as seasons come and go. You certainly could have said they endure as time passes. You don't have to, endure means that. You don't have to, they become more grotesque over time. Now that's true of tattoos you haven't named and maybe you didn't explicitly think of, but it's true. So many people don't like that tattoo of snakes and bloody knives when they get jobs as junior executives. You know that? Or the first 6 women you slept with when you actually have a possible lifetime partner. You don't really, but the word grotesque, like proud vandals and all of that, these are big words that do not scream in the poem. That's your achievement. They just modulate the poem into a more stake. This isn't a poem about everything. It's not a poem about everything. It's not about trees, nor has it yet become, this is a poem about an abused young woman or something. That's not, that could kill the poem. I know it doesn't kill people's sharing and therapy or anything else, but it could kill the poem. I don't even know if that's what the poem is about. But it keeps the poem going in a way that is really interesting. Now, as seasons come and go, some time has passed between something and now. And now we've evolved to pick at the weak spots. I am not sure, from having read the poem as a whole a couple of times and not being quite clear what it's about, nor that it has to be about one thing, but I'm not sure that saying we've evolved, although I believe this phrase fits our current culture, absolutely. The poem isn't really just about our current culture. So I love the phrase, we've evolved to pick at the weak spots. Where I think we are in our culture, sometimes I feel like putting on Facebook, thank you all for showing me, making me really understand what it was like to live in the Middle Ages. That's what so as a history buff, but really, so we've evolved to pick at the weak spots, which we're all, half the time, civilized people are doing all the time to each other. But I don't really think this poem is about culture. When you say evolved, do you mean a set of people who had problems and went through therapy? I'm not sure that that word evolved helps the poem at that point. What might be, and now we pick at the weak spots. We worry the scabs and open the wounds. And that, however, is strong stuff. I think it's better my way to get evolved out as a concept that pulls away. But it's a tough one because you're promising something that I don't know if you're going to deliver, because it's something that you might pull off deftly as you have entirely on a metaphorical level. You kept making it realer and more powerful. But at some point, metaphor alone might not suffice. So anyway, then you go to, before you do this story of the boy that all this builds up to, you go to, quite naturally, the woodpecker. Now here I'm going to praise you for your ear, which has been at work all the time, but just single out the woodpecker seeks the brittle clefts. And you hear the woodpecker in there. You don't have to have intended it. The T's, the brittle clefts. And that's a good description of what the woodpecker does. And then we have riddled with insects. That's another nice, sharp consonants there. Brittle becomes riddled. It's like a rhyme, a little rhyme. With insects. Insects matches clefts. I don't believe you intended it. You had a good ear working. Brittle clefts, riddled insects. That's a nice thing. The bark beetle carves bark and carves his tracks. That's A music going on. If you were conscious of it, it would be terrible because you'd make something, you make mistakes. But it just works. It's knitting it together with sound. Just beneath the skin. Now, we're starting to reach any number of places where presumably a poem could stop, but then you have to say, well, what did it do? What did it achieve? And how does it get to do more? Walking in the woods, I think really, and I love single sentence poems. I think really this is another instance where freeing up the second part of it, or maybe a third, as a separate movement might help you. might help you see what's happening, or might help it show its contours more effectively. Because you got me from walking from, is there anything that isn't marked? And you're building other things in parallels, and they're all real and physical. They introduce scarring, they introduce somebody was victimized somehow, emotionally, physically, by vandals, by an emotional. So, and we got grotesque. In time, it doesn't go away, even if you can handle it. Even the broadest tree is furrowed with the names of lovers long divorced or dead. That's like an ending almost. It's like she did with Russian. You're creating your own epigraphs, kind of almost out of unstated folk tales you could invent. You know, they're like morals from folk tales or wisdom. So now you're going to bring it back to a story, and then you do the woodpecker seeks the brittle. That you could have a short middle section there, another section with these little natural things you're paying attention to. The poet and the listener and the poem itself, first of all, are paying attention to these things. You get kinds of attention going, like the Proctor poem. It was delicious to me how she kept the same attention going the day after when they're grading it. That level of attention. So you did the attention. Why drop it? But now you give me a different time, a different judgment, and now we've evolved. So I really think at least one movement ends. And since it was all stanzas, you can handle that better. When I see these individual lines, you know, well, you already have your stanzas, but I'm thinking, I don't know if you're getting any, sometimes it's totally artificial to do this. Sometimes a poem is helped. You do a little 1, 2, 3, or a little Roman numeral lowercase 1, then you would do a lowercase 2. It's like a movement of the same poem. It's like a work of music that has movements. And and then we have, and now we've, so then you do maybe the open the wounds. It could end there, could end at dead. You could have a short section of a couple of these together. And then we move to the next thing. The woodpecker seeks the brittle, or it could be part of a short section, but you're paying attention to nature, and it's like an intermezzo, more than that, between what the next section is going to be that's going to tell a story, which is the heavy hitting part of the story. I don't know how I feel about it, but it seems necessary to the poet to tell this story. It seems to be what the reason for all of this, to build to this. It seems that way, like the poem wants to build to this. Without this, it's not the same poem. And so you got there. And I do think it needs a separate section for this. There might be a middle section of paying that other attention, smaller, and then there's this section of a story is now going to be told that nobody can expect. Poem set us up for it. Everything was interesting and strong and beautiful and scarring and real. And now we move to a story of a boy. And you're going to have to deal with that. I would suggest taking that section and working it through again, paying attention to it, thinking about where it comes in the distribution of energies of the whole poem. And it has real strong stuff you're not shy about. You're discreet, but you're not shy. You have the boy doing this. Looking back, his thrusts are puny. I don't think you have to say looking back, because we just know that whatever we're going to know or not know about the speaker, it's looking back. His thrusts are puny, stunted, but in the moment he is monster. I wouldn't even say a monster, I read myself, a nameless fear. We're trying to recapture a girl's traumatic moment that doesn't leave her on some level. That's what I said about kids. Take something a parent said or did once. I know a parent who slapped a kid one time ever. And the grown son will say, remember that time you slapped? You're going to make an impression, which is probably what it was for, actually. It'll probably work. But in the moment, his mother goes, no, with a story. We have mother. Mother enters again. The poem was for your mother. Did he hurt you? You can tell me. Part of what's in this poem is I couldn't really tell you. I think a little bit of defiance of the mother. Even at 4, she knows the truth is heavy. I'm not sure naming the character sister, brother. I might do she knows, because you move the whole thing into a different register. You're not saying I knew, but I'm just suggesting that as a little trick, going in that way. As cold as a boulder, which is lovely. No, mama, she says, not really. Now that could end the poem. too. Do you understand? A poem could end there with a very rich movement of emotional movements, call it like music moves. And that we would know it's speaking worlds beyond what it's saying. However, if you want another movement, if you want to fill out the story, you could. I'm kind of suggesting that maybe it does end, no, mama, she says, not really. One reason for that is, with all of the beautiful little hopscotch moves you've made to get here across time, emotion, little stanza to stanza, and I'm suggesting even separating them perhaps into movements, you end up where you need to end up, with a memory that is still very present. And so in the immediacy of the now, that is the memory, she's even quoted, no, mama, she says, not really. That speaks into, this is what a real poem does sometimes. It never resolves itself in one hearing. Your writing group, and I'm not knocking them, it can be wonderfully useful and important, but you can't believe everything they tell you. You have to take it away and see what made you see your poem differently, which could be something one of them said, something they agreed with, or something none of them even said that you got from something they said that made you see the poem differently. And that's why writing groups are so useful, besides introducing their humanity and the readings they have and their wonderful poems. So this is what you need to be your own writing group always at that point, and try to realize, and I am going to take a guess that is not a brave guess, not a brilliant guess, but it's kind of brave because I don't want to offend you, but it looks like it was motivated by some real childhood thing you experienced with a brother, but it could just be your sister with a brother. It could be somebody you knew, you're trying to tell the story of somebody else, and we don't have to know any of that. But it looks like it was motivated by something real. You want to say?
It was my mother, yes. That's why it's to my mother.
But it's not your brother who hurt you in some way.
No.
Okay. So
yeah, let's be entirely clear about that.
So you did a little violence to your mother, a little clever thing of telling your mother. There was a lot more going on than you ever wanted to hear, even though you were inviting me to tell it in me. And that's, so far, I don't find that shocking at all. I find that goes with being mother-daughter. It goes with children's world and your world, but it leaves scars, and you're kind of saying there were scars. You brought up scars. Scars are part of this poem forever. In effect, I think it's a stronger poem if the scar part is brought home the way you did it, and doesn't need a really traumatic narrative going on. What it needs is scars are left, scars are left. Even you never said tattoo, but I have to think, even in a tattoo, later it doesn't go away, and you'd like it to go, maybe you have to get it taken out and leave it. So you're saying you were mother, you didn't really realize, you think you were friendly, you think you were inviting me to tell you anything. Of course you weren't me, this girl, and you don't know how I didn't feel I could tell you things. And that's each human being's individual childhood. Some of us are lucky to have a mother or father, some are brutalized. It is each human being's life that you have your memories. I love the fact that current science indicates on some completely unknowable but almost measurable level, each of our human beings alive, and probably each being, literally lives in your own time and space. It doesn't mean you're into a separate universe, but literally we do not share the identical time and space as my understanding of contemporary physics is. And that fits Einstein too, really. And one of those reasons is an old theorem that was very important, Leibniz's theorem in cosmology. No two beings, no two objects in the universe can actually occupy the exact same place at the same moment. So if you have two things distant in the universe that seem identical, they're not in the same place, which makes that wonderful experiment you know of with particles going separately but somehow communicating. That if you know anything about contemporary news about physics, that's what makes it beautiful to me, because Leibniz's theorem was for a couple hundred years part of physics, which is, it's different. It is a thing in the universe. And now, who the hell knows? Maybe they're all communicating all the time. But inwardly, we aren't the same. We have our set of experiences, time and memory. And that's really something that enters into all of our attempt to communicate to others, yours to your mother and yours to a reader. So look at all the hard things that I just trampled all over with heavy-handed enthusiasm, all the difficult things, a poem dealing with this stuff in this way, I've never seen one deal with this, with the trees, and it has to do. And you can't do them by knowing them in advance and trying to do them all. But you have to be good and lucky and have your ear open to your own poem to be able to have a poem pull off that much. And I'm getting it that way, but 99% of the 100 readers will never say, oh, look at all this stuff. They'll just realize this is a powerful, interesting poem. So I really think it's a very complex poem with all of the inward moves it's making for you. And I love you for it stopping short of condemning, polemicizing, going into abuse as a topic, which is a real topic, even complaining. Remember T.S. Eliot, who once said that the poem represents everything he has felt and read. It isn't any one thing. And I think there's truth to that. And to Whistler in the famous trial at the end of the 19th century, when he sued somebody, famous art critic and brilliant writer who was a generation older and couldn't understand his painting, white on white. In court, the British court, the prosecutor, or the defense attorney for the guy he was suing for demeaning his art, said, how long did it take you to write that, to paint that painting, Mr. Whistler? A famous answer that so many artists could give. And he just responded, I read the transcript, this is true. He said, all my life. So this isn't art, this isn't a painting, this is crap. How long did it take you to paint that? All my life. So that's the honor I'm giving you as one reader. This poem achieves a lot. Now, whether any other good reader will read it and think it achieved that much, will say, well, how did you go to this? What does this have to do? You can't fight the fact that people, particularly knowledgeable people, have a sense of what a poem should be or could be. I have that sense, but I'm very lucky that I never felt the need to tell anybody else how they should write. I love the poems and I love opening them to how I'm seeing them and what you can find in the cracks for yourself. So this is entirely up to you, but I would tell you this. If you drop the last stanza, play with 3 sections perhaps. The middle one might just be transitional with these observations again, but they mean more, they're pivots. And then give that last one that's like personal memory. Justifies the dedication, leaves us with mystery. What good work of art shouldn't leave you with mystery? Shouldn't exhaust it. Oh, I now understand. She was, her mother didn't listen to her. She was abused. Or, I mean, that's ridiculous. Why do I even need the damn poem? So many people think they need to write a poem to tell people that somebody's hurt who's abused. You don't need the poem. You might need it to express yourself. A little therapy, but you don't need it. You're making art out of this. So I'm giving you the credit that this, if you rethink it your own way, try not to pack more meaning into it though. Deal with the meaning you have here, shape it, let it speak. Maybe you'll find a word that you want to change, but don't get inspired to tell a whole new narrative. That'll be another poem. Unless you're looking for a book-length poem out of this. So you have a beautiful poem. I mean, a publishable poem here, and you won't find it's this way. I'm sorry I'm this repetitive and talky. I am. Frank can laugh. Sitting in front of me is a sign I wrote after talking to him for a long time. I wrote in magic marker, stop talking, and I taped it. Did I look at it? One reason is I was enthusiastically feeding on these fine, interesting drafts. Enthusiastically, and that made me so happy because he and I were both cursing out loud. We were both in a dark mood for the hour and a half we spent yet today trying to make it work. Well, we spent 2 full days. So you guys elevated me when I saw the familiar faces and when I saw these lovely drafts again. I've read them, but when I saw them up again and realized every one of them was stronger than I thought when I read them yesterday.
Ariel, when you said the poem was, you mentioned your mother, are you saying this experience happened to your mother?
Yeah. I don't know if that was
I didn't even get that.
Stan's understanding. I was like, yeah.
Okay.
It was her brother.
Is that your name or your mother's name? Ariel.
Your mother and her brother. Your mother and her brother were the objects of that poem, basically.
You mean for my
mother? And her mother, my grandmother.
Yeah.
So it's not me. It's not me interacting with my mother and not having her understand me. It was her. Yeah.
The truth is, I misread that in every reading, even a good one. I think I gave a good reading, but every reading, has misreading in it. Whole literary theories that destroy literature are built on that. But the thing is, every reading has misreading. That's why you want to read a poem over and over as you change, as you. So what I'm going to ask you is am I right to now understand that Ariel Rudolph Harwick is your mother or grandmother's name?
No, that's my name. I'm writing about my mother who interacting with her grandmother who was victimized by her brother.
In your version of it, where you actually have the stanzas.
There's 4 equal length stanzas. So that's
what I'm saying is, does Ariel Rudolph Harwick appear as a dedication under the Heartwood?
So that's just my name.
Yeah, that's
okay. So I see the confusion there.
For my mother would be the second line.
Yeah.
No. It's supposed to say for. I didn't even.
For my mother.
With an F.
Yeah, I thought you were speaking of I thought you were very.
I wasn't reading off of this. I was reading off my PDF, so I totally missed that omission.
You're good. I don't know whatever else you ever
did.
It's
supposed to say for my mother, and when you put your name up at the top, I think a lot of us thought that there was a slight confusion there, because the author's name often appears in magazines or whatever, either above the title or at the very bottom of the page.
Consider it above the title, then. That's
okay. That's all right. That's all right. No. I think most readers would read it exactly the way Stan.
Right. But I mean, it's irrelevant on one level. What's relevant is the good word heartwood and how you worked it through.
Yeah.
Even the fact that heart and wood is like bonfire opera, something that was living, but might be not living now, but it's solid and unyielding. And then there's heart. It's a lovely title. However, what I'm going to say is the fact that it's your mother's story makes it a very nice poem to your mother. I thought there might be a little defiance in there, which doesn't mean anything I said, but it's a very nice poem. It's giving her story its due that she passed on to you. And I'm just wondering if how that rate goes through the poem. You don't need to spell that out. You can kill the poem by making stage directions or something, explaining everything. Sometimes writing groups want you to explain everything, because I don't understand this. You should make that clearer, because sometimes they just need something to say, you know what I mean? So we have Heartwood. I wonder if you, for my mother, nobody will really understand, they don't need to, why it's dedicated to your mother, but by the time you get to the ending, the last section, that little narrative, a mother, her mother, a girl, her mother, a brother who hurt her, that she remembered, even if it was trivial to others. You've been talking about scars and lasting and all that. So when you get there, I would also look at that section a little separately. I would take each section in turn and go through it separately, not to stuff a lot of more stuff into it, but just to be sure the exact word choice is now that you have a shape and understanding of the poem you couldn't have had when you wrote it or tried to revise it. Is everything exactly where it should be? That's the time where you sometimes realize another verb or a word or something that makes it function better, and maybe there isn't any. The sound, the ear is something I look for in superior poems. It's unobtrusive ear at work. Sometimes the poet doesn't know you have a good ear. You shouldn't be too conscious of it, you'll overplay it. The woodpecker seeks the brittle clefts, pause, riddled with insects. That is a gorgeous line. That is a line that, like a million others, like one of mine that I read at the beginning, a line that could be a one-line minimalist poem with the right title. Now that brings me back to the question of titling, and I think Heartwood works beautifully, but it can't work at one fell swoop. Has to develop. Everything refers on some level to Heartwood. You're not going to name it. It's not dominant, but it's like the linchpin in a certain metaphoric way. And I think if you look at the last part, when your version that I cannot see, Ariel, are all of the stanzas of generally equal weight. They take about as much, they don't have to be equal totally, but are they all occupy about the same clump of space? Or
yes.
Some of them go off?
They're all like 7 lines, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
That to me, I understand. I don't have that in front of me because I failed to upload it from
No,
my original document to this document. So I was stuck with what came up here. Otherwise, I would have had it in front of me. So I would have seen that. So that, to me, maybe it works beautifully as it is, because stanzas have breaks. But I hope you will take in good spirit the suggestions I gave you, so at least look again from that larger look and see, is the space it occupies, the way it moves, plenty good, even if somebody's always going to disapprove, by the way. Somebody's always, you're going to feel like somebody doesn't like you as a person for something you wrote. I heard that yesterday from a really fine poet whose group he doesn't want to go to anymore because he was being judged for something he said in the poem. Because that's how we are. And you said it brilliantly about how we evolved to pick at the weak spots, to worry the scabs and open the wounds. And now I look at that line differently, because you really are talking about you and us today in our current readership. Whereas back in your mother's era, they didn't talk about a lot of stuff. Like all of us who might come from a generation who lived through the Holocaust. It's absolutely typical of us. And the most innovative seminal cartoon book of all time, Mouse, that got the first Pulitzer Prize for a cartoon rendering of the Holocaust, is about that, M-A-U-S. If you're like Allison, what's her name? I've met her, I have her, the Pulitzer Prize winning lesbian cartoonist who did powerful stuff. The Iranian woman who wrote about how terrible Iran was when the revolution came. That stuff. Cartoons getting Pulitzer Prizes, dealing in book,
Wow.
Mouse was about this middle-aged guy with a reputation as a cartoonist and dealt with, going to his father, or I think it was, and asking him. That's what it shows you. The mouse asking the older mouse, what happened? Because that generation, which I was in, you never would hear from your parents if they went through the Holocaust, or your grandparents. The last thing they would tell you. They don't want to curse you with, you're in America. You don't need these things. These things shouldn't have happened. They are not going to tell you. So of course, a generation or two later, they want to discover it. They want to relearn it. They want to know it. That's our story. It's an American story. But so you are in that somewhere here. That's why I brought that all up. This poem is doing something that large in its own smaller canvas. And after all, his canvas was just the story of two mice, as the older mouse tells them little bits about the Holocaust. So it wasn't dealing with the Holocaust. It was a small way. And you're dealing with something less significant, I grant that. But you're dealing with something potentially large in a small way. And among the large things it's dealing with, quite obviously, is your relationship to your mother and her relationship to her mother. Continuity of generations. It's very lovely, lovely poem. I'm quite enthusiastic. I've been enthusiastic 3 or 4 times here, all sincere. Maybe if I had to rate them or give some star to some, I would pick one over another. There's at least 2. This might be one, but I think we're really, really fine, maybe. But that tells you everything you need to know if you don't win a contest, but you get to be a semi-finalist or a finalist. The actual judge who's empowered at that time to pick something will pick the one their gut leans to or their taste leans to for that moment. And similarly, publication. I'd like to see you and a couple of the others put this exactly so you feel really good about it. Maybe you do already. Send it around with a couple of others that are decent poems. See if somebody will be taken by this. And if you don't get it, Rubin didn't lie to you and mislead you. It has to find the right reader at the right moment. If you don't already know this, and you may or may not, it's practical that today you can go online and you can see for a magazine, even if they're only a print magazine, what their deadlines are and what they're up to. None of us, Frank's age or mine, when we started writing, not that you're 10 years old, but when we started writing, you would send it off through the mail. You wouldn't even know if they'd ever received it. And sometimes 2 years might pass. You'd have to inquire, did you ever get the poem I sent you? And now everybody is blessed by the fact that before you send it somewhere, you can look at a sample issue usually. You can see, well, is this the kind of place that might take me? I'm sorry for that. You'd like to think anybody will take many kinds of poems, but you get a feel for it. You can feel, is this company I wouldn't mind being in? I mean, they seem to be doing pretty good work. More than that, though, you can see what they'll tell you. They can tell you, we are not looking at new poems now because the next issue will be a theme issue. Or for the next issue, nothing's, or we're closed. We're putting the next issue together. We won't open again until August 1st. And if you know those things, it can save you immense amount of agony people our age, poets our age, went through. Not only that, if you're a professional like me, you'd go to these AWP conferences. You'd go to the book fair, most of all, and you'd meet some of the editors, and they might give you mimeographed sheets about our next guidelines that nobody knew existed, or they changed, or when will you have your next issue? Well, you know, that's how we got that information. And that information is available to anybody, along with 10 million places you could publish if you want the thrill of it being published. But I will also give my final advice to you. A poem that this crafted, really, that does this much work with restraint,